We are up on YouTube, good to go. And I'm gonna
Excellent.
start recording now.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending. I officially call
We
the
are up on YouTube, good to go.
meeting for the Dighton Zoning Board of Appeals special meeting for Strawberry Fields, Thursday, May 14th, 2020. The time is now 6:10, obviously held remotely. I just want to read the disclaimer that we have at the top of the agenda that was posted. It just says, due to the increasing concerns surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic, this public hearing will be held remotely with no physical meeting location. Those seeking to provide public input should do so using the methods listed below. Video and audio of the meeting will be aired on Comcast Local TV 9 at a later date. A live recording of the meeting will be available on the Town of Dighton YouTube channel, which can be accessed using this link, and the link is provided below. For those of you who prefer just to hear it, it's www.youtube.com/Town of Dighton, all one word. And the public input phone line during the meeting is 508-669-6431, and that's going to be extension 114. You can leave a voicemail if necessary. We have Carrie Easterday of the Planning Board Office Manager, who's graciously joining, who's going to be here for us to take any kind of calls that we have. And public input, if you wish to do so during email, before or during the meeting, is the letter J, GRAY at Dighton-ma.gov. And please use email subject line Strawberry Fields public input, and please include your name and address for the record. Okay, so next, as we did last meeting, just in lieu of the Pledge of Allegiance tonight, I would like to take a brief moment of silence in recognition of those who are experiencing loss of our fellow Americans due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So if we could just please pause for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. All right, so thank you all for attending our continued public hearing for Strawberry Fields. Just bear with us if there are any technical glitches along the way. As far as I know, I think things went pretty well last time. I haven't really heard any major feedback as to how this is not going to be feasible. It seems to be working pretty well so far. So tonight on the call, we do have the staff of the zoning board. We have the staff of the town hall, consultants, the Strawberry Fields applicant, and we also have members of the public joining us on the conference call, who will later speak during the public input portion, or if they have an agenda item that we've already listed below. Once again, Carrie Easterday, the Planning Board Office Manager, is here taking any public input. So we just want to make sure that we have Jonathan Gray. With Jonathan Gray, yes, of course. We also have Jonathan Gale. He's a zoning board member, but he will be attending this meeting as a member of the public, and any comments that he has will be submitted during the public input portion. We also have zoning board member Ryan Eckerson, and Ryan, just to catch me up, haven't been sworn in yet, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I have not been sworn in yet.
Okay, and we should have Selectman Nancy Goulart here, but Jonathan, I don't see her. Is she here?
I don't believe so. I did send her the information, so she may just pop in later on.
Okay, and we have an attorney, Dennis Murphy, and he will be representing the abutters. And we have the former zoning board member, Joe Pacheco here. So we are going to go right down to start off the business. However, just for the public, for those of you at home, if you wish to follow along with any links, if you go to the Town of Dighton webpage, scroll all the way down for departments, you'll find zoning. And there will be on the sidebar additional links, and then click on Strawberry Fields public documents. That is a link to all of the documents that we are referencing tonight. Everything is there for you to view as well. So we are going to get right into this. So first things first, we're going to have updates and presentation by the applicant. And then we have also by the zoning board, consultants, and council. So I figured just to pick up where we left off, a large portion of last meeting, with a lot of discussion amongst the attorneys as to some of the language in some of the waivers that have been submitted. So at this point, I just wanted to turn it over to Attorney Marguerite Mitchell, the Zoning Board of Appeals, Dayton attorney. If you would like to comment on any kind of updates for that, please.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board. After the last meeting, I did have the opportunity to connect with Attorney Augustino for the developer to address some of the board's thinking with regards to the waiver requests that have been presented, and to have a conversation about where I understand the board has come from in the past with regards to these waiver requests, to hear the concerns of the developer that they have with the board continuing with procedures as they've done in the past, and to also express the interests of the board as I understand them as it goes forward and addresses these waiver requests, with the hopes that some of that conversation doesn't have to continue to happen here, because I think we both heard both of the positions of the board and the developer at the last meeting. So given those conversations that we had, we know that many of the waiver requests that have been made here relate to sort of overall procedures that exist in bylaws and ordinances, and not necessarily local bylaws or ordinances that have substantive changes or requirements in them. So a lot of our conversation was spent trying to address how is the board going to reflect any waiver requests that relate to procedures. And I believe that an agreement has been reached that will show that, you know, the board understands that procedural requirements are governed here by Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, and that this comprehensive permit and the plan, as well as Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, will be what will control this development as it goes forward. And so in light of that, you know, rather than, again, the board's general, my understanding, their ongoing resistance to just waiving the entire provision entirely, we, I believe, have reached a consensus around language that would substitute the Zoning Board of Appeals for whichever board or entity the local bylaw provision is relating to. So most of them are planning board provision. So substitute the Zoning Board of Appeals for the planning board, and also reflect that the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B, and the comprehensive permit and the plan will control the procedural piece that might be different than what is required in that bylaw. So I believe that we've reached that consensus. Hopefully that will help us move forward as we review these waivers. I'm going to suggest to you after the waiver is read and the rationale from the developer is provided, that if this is one of those types of procedural situations, that will be the recommendation that I will be utilizing, that we follow the agreed upon language changes. And then when you see your draft decision, you'll be able to see exactly what that wording looks like.
Okay. And Attorney Augustino.
Hopefully that will help us move forward and really spend our time talking about the more substantive waiver elements.
Okay.
Yeah,
Attorney,
thank you,
go ahead.
Marguerite, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. That description does summarize the exchange I had with Attorney Mitchell. We do still maintain our objection to that procedure, but our willingness to accept some clear language that in lieu of a waiver, which is traditionally, in my experience, what is done, there will be clear language that the permit, Chapter 40B, and inconsistent terms or generally inconsistent provisions of Chapter 40B will supersede the language in the local bylaw that this board apparently is of the opinion that they want to rewrite rather than waive. So, you know, our objection stands to the extent this continues this evening and you start scratching your head when you read some of these and say, well, wait a second, maybe that doesn't make sense. You know, it's up to the board, but we've found a way to live with this board's approach if the board wants to continue that approach by means of what Marguerite described. The one caveat is that In some of these administrative provisions, if you look at the underlying bylaw and the underlying references to the subdivision control law, there are specific, even more specific procedures that are outlined as far as certified mailings to the town clerk and a certain number of days that have to elapse beyond an inspection. And although the catch-all language should address those, I did leave Attorney Mitchell with the caveat that I need to see how the final document reads to ensure that we are not creating a potential disaster for ourselves when, 2 years from now, when we go to build, someone says, well, there's this local bylaw that says you failed to submit a certified letter to the town clerk, which it should, in my opinion, be waived. But we just have to make sure that that is clearly outlined. So with that, the board will go through the provisions. Marguerite will likely identify certain ones as what we've referred to as administrative. And we can just say, agree to table it, and council will look at the details on the language later. So to the extent there are any specific issues, where there's a specific submission procedure that's outlined in a local bylaw and 40B is directly contradictory, I might point that out this evening in a 2-second line and just say, there's 40B language that's directly on point. And we can leave that to council to draft that up. So I think the applicant has said its piece on this exchange, and hopefully we can work through these bylaw waiver requests expeditiously and not get bogged down. I would ask the board, to the extent you find yourselves scratching your head a little bit, perhaps we can revisit the idea of saying, well, wait a second, just because we've done this in the past doesn't necessarily, make it work for this situation. So I'll leave the board with that, and hopefully we can move through these waiver requests and discussion regarding conditions as expeditiously as possible without inadvertently creating any disasters for, both the applicant, the board, and anyone else that might be interested. So that's where we are now. And thanks to Attorney Mitchell for her time and exchanging emails with me on that issue since last week.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Mitchell, is there anything else you want to say in reference to that? Or is that
I'm all set. Thank you.
all set? Okay, perfect. So but before we get into that, John, and just last call, is Nancy on this call? Has she popped in that I didn't notice?
I don't believe so,
Okay,
but I
So-
can give a quick update regarding stormwater.
yeah, that's what I was going to lead into next, but I figured I would turn it over to her if she had anything quick she wanted to mention. But if you would like to go into that quickly before we head into the waivers, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I'm just making sure I've got the date right. So for Stormwater Committee, they'll be meeting next week on the 20th at 1 p.m. Actually in person at Old Town Hall. The meeting will be between the Stormwater Committee and the first item on their agenda is just discussion with Strawberry Fields. So I'm not sure exactly who from the Strawberry Fields project team is going to be there. Oh, and yeah. So there will be some folks from Strawberry Fields there to talk things through with the Stormwater Committee. But it's not really something that a whole bunch of members of the public should really attend, because there is a 10-person max for the room to maintain social distancing. So I have reserved a spot for myself. If another member of the ZBA would like to attend, we can potentially request that through Roz and the Board of Health. But I believe if I'm not sure exactly what the discussion will be for the Stormwater Committee, but perhaps the team can speak to that.
So, that being said, the only person that I would say should attend would be Greg, in addition to yourself as the point person for the project. If there's no really essential need for him to be there, I would say it's not worth, going asking the Board of Health and the stormwater to, add additional chairs to the table, no pun intended, if it's not really needed. Greg, do you feel there's anything that you feel like you absolutely want to attend, or are you fine with Jonathan attending for us?
No, I'm fine with Jonathan attending. I think that'll be fine for the ZBA's matter. He'll be making all the recordings and records of what's going to be stated in the meeting. So I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. All right. So then just we can cross it off the list, Jonathan. We're obviously fine with you attending.
Okay.
There's no need to ask them to add any extra chairs for us. So if you're all set attending that would be great.
Sure. So
May I ask, is that meeting going to be recorded on YouTube also?
I would assume so, but I'm not entirely sure. Is there maybe a way that cable, if they can hear us, could chime in on that?
Sorry, what's the question?
If the Stormwater Committee meeting on May 20th is going to be filmed or streamed on YouTube or any kind of way for the public to get, or anyone from our side to get access to that.
My committee has not been told, given any information about such meeting, but
Okay.
when we do, I will let you know, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. So Peter Williams, if it turns out that it's not something that is going to be filmed for whatever reason, is that something that you think you'd want to attend? Is that why you were asking?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so Jonathan Gray, if we could maybe be in touch with them, I would say concerning the date as soon as possible to figure out what their plans are for broadcasting that meeting. Because if so, then in that case, we would like to recommend that they add one more chair to that so Peter Williams can attend.
sure. Yeah, no guarantees, Peter. They may have reached the cap in terms of number of people, but if not, I'll reach out to Roz and see if they're, number one, recording it, and two, if you can join. And I'll be in touch with you on that.
Okay, great, thanks.
Excellent. Okay, so just before we get into the waiver, just one more thing. I just would like to once again remind the public with for any input tonight, you may call the public input phone line. And once again, that number is 508-669-6431, extension 114. You may leave a voicemail if necessary. You will be reaching Carrie Easterday, the office manager for the planning board, and she will field any public input questions. Or you may email Jonathan Gray, our zoning board office manager, and his email address is the letter J, GRAY @Dayton-ma.gov. So that being said, before we
Mr.
get,
Chairman.
go ahead.
Just got a quick, since we're on the agenda item, sort of
Sure.
town commission updates, I might as well just give an update because I know that Mr. Logan had asked about a couple of questions at the last meeting that I did follow up on. I reached out to the building commissioner and the water district on the sign for Strawberry Fields, as well as the hydraulic model for water. Both of them have not gotten back to me on that yet. Most likely because of the quick turnaround for this meeting. I did just briefly call the sewer department to sort of touch base with them. And it seems as if there may be a disagreement, I would characterize it as potentially on the Strawberry Fields daily usage. I know that the team had submitted their projected gallons per day, which, if I believe correctly, was in the area of around 12,000 gallons per day. That was sort of the expected usage for this project. Sewer department thinks that might be a little bit higher, and so I think perhaps it might be useful for the Strawberry Fields team to sort of loop back around to the sewer department engineer to see if you can come to some sort of agreement on the gallons per day usage, as well as what the peak flow for the project is expected. And if you can sort of come together on agreement on those numbers, I think it would probably be helpful to sort of then figure out what sort of infrastructure would be necessary from that point. So I just wanted to sort of mention that as sort of a conversation I had over the week.
Yeah, and the reason why we're just leaving it at that. So we have not gotten anything formal in writing from them. This was not a formal conversation, nor did they submit anything after the conversation. And we didn't want to just leave this up to, a verbal conversation and go from there. So that's why we advise that it probably would be best for the engineers to be in touch with that as well.
Yeah, there's a possibility they may send a letter, but it was sort of, I had the conversation yesterday, so really wasn't enough time for them to necessarily write up something. But if there is anything that comes in from the sewer department in sort of an official letter, I will pass it along, certainly.
Okay.
So just quickly, Mr. Chairman, obviously, we're happy to answer any official letter that comes from the sewer department, but, let's keep in mind that we've been discussing, and I know Jonathan didn't have the benefit of this since he was a late addition to the team at Town Hall and these hearings. But we've been discussing water and sewer at length since the inception of this process. And, if they have a problem with the numbers that we presented, which, if you recall, are direct usage numbers from another comparable project that we built, it's actual numbers that reflect usage from a similar project. So, if they have a problem or concern about the waiver requests relevant to water and sewer at this point, I think the key is that the board has the information that the board needs. And if the board wants to get one last comment letter from either of those agencies, happy to do so. I think, just to be clear, as a practical matter and as a courtesy, Greg might give the gentleman at the sewer department a call just to reaffirm what we've said. But, I just wanted to remind everybody that I think we're past that point of revisiting some of the submissions that we've given. So hopefully we can just affirm the numbers. We're stating here that we're affirming those numbers. We'll likely reach out as a courtesy just to figure out what any disconnect was, because I believe we have a good working relationship with both of those agencies. But I don't want anyone to get the impression that we're re-engaging in a fact-finding mission on those types of issues. So
Right. And now, Jonathan, I know you said it was kind of just a phone conversation. Did she say what did she say that she was intending to give us anything? Did she say where her change in findings came from?
Yeah, don't quote me on the exact number, but I believe the number that they said was 110 gallons per day per bedroom.
yeah, that's the standard Board of Health Title V flow rate. But what we had done was, again, this is town sewer, town water, and we've been talking about capacity issues for both. And what we're showing is that with actual usage, you don't plan for those numbers, or in a 40B context, in these contexts, no one uses 110 gallons per day. It just doesn't exist. And I think anybody will affirm that the 110 gallon per day is for design purposes for a leaching field under what really is worst case scenario if your toilet is running for 6 days in a row. I mean, I'm being obviously a little facetious, but
Yeah, right.
I think everybody understands that. So we don't want to spend too much time on that tonight, but yeah, we'll address that. That we'll affirm and resend the numbers that we have and tell whoever's asking that's the wrong number.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I didn't want to, obviously make this anything formal, because we didn't have anything in writing. It's more just something that was brought to Jonathan's attention. So I just wanted to let you guys know. Obviously, so there's no formal request or formal, discussion. That's why I just wanted to let you
Thank
guys
you.
know. All right. So that being said, we can go, Jonathan, Gray, there's nothing else, correct? We can go right into the waivers.
I have one question.
Sure.
Are we setting a time for the public to provide input and ask questions?
Yes, that's fine. So I know last meeting we set, the adjournment at 9, and we wrapped up around 8:15 to, from 8 to 8:15. We kind of discussed the future meetings, and then that last 45 minutes was saved for public input. To me, I think that seems fine. I think that gives us ample time to discuss any, to get a good chunk into this. Marguerite, do you think that's a fair time limit for this evening?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
Mr.
All right. So
Chairman,
go ahead. Yep.
I have a couple questions that I can bring up. I don't know if we want to do it before we start getting into the waivers, but I have some unfinished business on the original that we were talking about in the last few meetings. I don't know if we want to talk about it now or do it later. I just want
No, that's fine, Greg. Go right ahead. I wasn't sure if there's anything else aside from the building commissioner and the water. So if there's anything else that you have, be good if you go into that now.
Well, again, I'm not sure if this is when we should be talking about it or later, but I'll bring it up now so everybody's in the, now last meeting, they made it stated they're gonna be using land for a bond for the phases. Peter Williams, have you had a chance to review how much the infrastructure would be able to be cost at this point in time for phase one and then phase two? So we know how many plots that we're gonna be accepting for one. Two, we also had another, a couple meetings back, we were talking about a playground, maybe a funding for it that just kind of got set aside. I just want to make sure we don't lose that window of opportunity. When we were talking to Bisher and last time, I just want to make sure that this all gets brought up, but whether it's now or after the waivers, I really don't care how it gets worked out. Greg Driscoll, me and him need to get together on design for the dumpster corrals, where it's going to be a CMU wall, fence, things like that. Obviously, I heard Jonathan Graves talking in regards to the building inspector, so that's all set. The water department I heard about, and I'm pretty confident with the flows of the sewer that Bishop presented to us. I feel that that is pretty close to the adequate. I just did the math. We're not talking a huge number difference here, but it is a little different.
Okay.
But those are the three things I just wanted to make sure. One was Peter Williams with how many plots we were going to have for the phases and the playground funding.
All right. So Peter, if you want to go ahead and go into the bonds.
I haven't looked at that yet, so that's something that I'll have to address.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just there will be waiver requests relevant to surety and bonding. And the idea was, once we're done with the waiver request, we'll get into the proposed conditions of approval. And, Mr. Logan, if you look at that draft that's available on the town's website, we proposed language that reflects that. And I think the answer would be that Mr. Williams can just plug in what he sees as appropriate pursuant to that language. So that is all addressed, as well as the other issues. We have placekeepers for those issues in that draft permit. That's part of what Marguerite and I had been working on to make sure that none of those issues were missed. So we do have placekeepers for those.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure it didn't get lost in the.
We don't miss anything.
All right, Greg. So Greg Logan, you're satisfied with that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right. So that being said, so Marguerite, do you intend we just pick up from the beginning or where we left off? Based on your conversations, what would you recommend that we do in terms of procedure here?
I believe last time we actually only covered 2 waivers. So I don't think we need to reread the 2 that we covered, but I think we might as well just address those 2 and then we can start. I still would start and just go through at this stage. We covered the first waiver and then I believe we covered 2250. So when we get to 2250, it's already been read into the public record on the last meeting. I think we don't have to read that one and my recommendation isn't going to change, but we can talk about it at that time.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Same with 2211.
Okay. Okay. So Jonathan Gray, if you want to go right into it, just starting off with number 1.
Sure. So Marguerite, do you want me to share the planning board's comments waiver list or just the Jacob Driscoll's engineering's waiver list?
I would suggest you share the planning board comments so that you have those right there for the public as well. I think you're reading just the waiver request and the rationale from Jacob Driscoll.
Okay.
But I think it'll be helpful to have the planning board comments present, and if we need to discuss them, we can through our conversation.
Okay.
All right. Take it away, Jonathan, whenever you're ready.
All right. What number are we going to?
So we can start with 2211 again, just because, as I mentioned, this was one of those administrative provisions that we have reached a consensus on the fact that the waiver itself will not be waived in its entirety, but there will be language added to make sure that it's clear that the Zoning Board of Appeals is the governing board, and that this is subject to the requirements of Chapter 40B, and also the permit and the plan. So we will draft that language together, and I'm just going to call this an administrative waiver situation.
Okay.
And then if the board, I don't know, Mr. Chairman, you and I never discussed, I assume the board, unless there's particular specific issue that there's input on, it's up to the board if they want to just be asked if they have input or questions on it, or if you want them to actually take some sort of deliberative vote. I guess I would suggest at this stage, you just ask the board members if there's any questions on 2211.
So
And we can move on.
do you advise we, like, after reading one, go into questions, or do we read three, or, and how do you recommend that we?
It's your call how you want to proceed on that point.
Okay, I personally, I'm okay if we want to, read maybe the three at once and then see how that works. So if you want to read the first, like three at a time, Jonathan, and then I'll open up for any input.
Sure. Do you want me to start with 2212?
Yes, please.
Okay. 2212 from the Planning Board Rules and Regulations. The applicant is responsible for the acquisition of the necessary rights and presentation of complete and correct information to the board. Failure to do so, including the failure or inability to obtain all necessary permits, licenses, releases, or rights, may be a reason for disapproval, rescission of an approved subdivision, and or modification of subdivision in addition to any other actions provided by law. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section, as the Zoning Board of Appeals will review these plans under a comprehensive permit per Mass General Law, Chapter 40B. I will proceed now to 2213. The board shall not approve or modify and approve any plan of a subdivision of land unless all lots and other aspects of such plan conform to the zoning bylaw of the town, or a variance from the terms thereof has been granted by the Board of Appeals. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section, as the Zoning Board of Appeals will review these under 40B. Section 2214. All applications for approval or endorsement, required plans, required submittals, and required fees shall comply in all respects with the provisions of these rules and regulations, unless the board authorizes a variation therefrom in specified instances. No application or plan shall be acted upon by the board until said plan, together with all required accompanying applications, forms, fees, lists, and other items have been delivered by the applicant and are properly executed and fully completed in accordance with these rules and regulations. Where the applicant fails to comply with these rules and regulations, the planning board may reject the application, and said application shall be deemed not submitted. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section, as the zoning board will review per 40B.
All right, so is there any input on any of these? What we'll do, I think I'll turn to the board for any comments, and then I will turn to Attorney Margaret Mitchell. So is there anyone on the board that has any comments to make on any of these?
On 2212.
Yep, go ahead, Greg.
I just think the board has the right to still hear from the other boards in regards to their concerns. We're still up in the air, like we were just discussing with the water, the sewer. I know Chris was stating that he didn't want to keep bringing that up, but I want to make sure that that 2212, I'm not comfortable with giving it waiving that without having some more input from the other boards, even though we are the final board that makes the decision on the 40B on that matter.
Anyone else among the board? No. Attorney Margaret Mitchell, do you have anything?
So with regards to all of these that were read, 1, 2, 3, and 4, I do find them to be administrative types of waivers. To get to your point, Mr. Logan, the advice and the agreement is that they will not be waived entirely. Rather, they will be noted as having the substitute of the zoning board of appeals for the planning board and having this be subject to the provisions of 40B and the comprehensive permit and the plan. So in this case with 2212, information instead of going to the planning board will be coming to this board, and you, under the provisions of chapter 40B, have the right to solicit feedback as you're doing from your other local boards. You have not closed the public hearing. And so while this public hearing remains open, other local boards and commissions have the right to provide you with their feedback. And that won't change.
Okay, so there's still going to be a condition in there for what we just discussed then.
It will be, it won't be waived in its entirety. It will indicate that that instead of being waived in its entirety, the zoning board of appeals is substituted for the planning board, and that the terms of this bylaw are still subject to chapter 40B and the comprehensive permit and the plan.
Okay,
And Marguerite, do we also, at this time, I know they're posted on, visually, should we read after we've read them, the planning boards or comments, or should we not?
You can if you want. Again, so the public is aware that if you want to do that, you're welcome to. I have reviewed the planning board's comments, and I don't mind. It's up to you if you want to provide that.
I guess for anyone listening at home who does not have the ability to see this, I would rather just, it's not long at all. It's a sentence. So, Jonathan, if you don't mind just going into, if you are reading off the planning board's comments, please.
Sure. For 2212, the planning board recommendation was that it's not applicable since the zoning board of appeals is approving body under chapter 40B. The waiver is unnecessary. For 2213, they recommended denial. This provides for the board of appeals to grant waivers and should not be waived. And for 2214, they recommended denial. This provides for the board of appeals to grant waivers and should not be waived.
Okay, thank you. So
I'll just respond by saying that I understand the point that's being made by the planning board in all of these cases, and I don't believe that the board is waiving its authority under chapter 40B at all with what you will be doing.
okay. So Jonathan, I guess for the future waiver requests, if you would like to just go after you read it, just read the planning board's comments right after, just so for those listening at home who can't visually follow along, they know what comment we are referencing, what waiver to. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. All
Want
right.
me to
So
proceed to 2215.
yes, please.
I guess it's actually not 2215. It's 2230. Professional and technical assistance. The board may assign as its agents appropriate town officials and may hire professional assistants to review plans, conduct material testing, conduct property surveys of land and infrastructure, inspect improvements, and to assure compliance with the subdivision control law and these rules and regulations at the cost of the applicant. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section, as the zoning board of appeals will review these plans under a comprehensive permit per 40B, and the planning board recommendation was deny. This requires the applicant to pay the reasonable costs of review and inspection of the improvements and should not be waived. They also, the next waiver is 2240, modification, amendment, or rescission. The board, on its own motion or in the petition of any interested person, shall have the power to modify, amend, or rescind its approval of a plan of a subdivision, or to require a change in a plan as a condition of its retaining the status of an approved plan, after due notice and an opportunity to the owner to be heard in accordance with General Law, Chapter 41S, Section 81W, as amended. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section as the zoning board of appeals will review per 40B. And the planning board recommendation is it's not applicable since the zoning board of appeals is the approving body under chapter 40B. The planning board cannot modify, amend, or rescind its approval. The waiver is unnecessary. And finally, section 2250, submission of plans. Plans shall not be considered submitted until all required documentation has been received by the board, including fees. And the applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section as the zoning board of appeals will review per 40B. And the planning board recommendation is deny. This requires the applicant to submit required documentation and should not be waived.
Okay, thank you. And anyone amongst the board with any comments or questions?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Again, this is probably going to be the same answer I got in the last one. 2230, professional technical assistance. I just want to make sure that it's going to be written in the language that the Board of Health agent or a third party would be doing the test pits again in the locations that we required them last time.
Okay, anybody else amongst the board with questions? Okay, Attorney Mitchell.
Thank you. So again, all three of those I consider to also be administrative in nature. And I have considered the planning board's recommendation as well. And I don't believe, because of the provisions that exist in chapter 40B, as well as the rules and regulations of this zoning board as it applies 40B and the rules and regulations of the state under chapter 40B, that any of the areas of concern that the planning board has with regards to something being lost by waiving or even amending this bylaw would actually happen. Those provisions already exist, and all of the concerns around having fees in place ahead of time and having the review by various consultants is already provided for in chapter 40B. To get to Mr. Logan's point, so I have made note that you want a condition in your comprehensive permit that the Board of Health agent will be witnessing test pits if that's not done before you go to vote on the comprehensive permit. So I have made that note and would expect to put that type of a condition into your comprehensive permit.
Thank you, Marguerite.
Thank you. All right, so Jonathan, if you want to go into the next three, please.
Sure. Section 2260, fees. The fees indicated in Appendix A, the planning board fee schedule, shall accompany the submittal of application materials of the various plans specified in the rules to cover costs of processing, technical review, and inspection. The planning board's authority to impose fees to engage consultants to review plans is regulated by these regulations and is derived from Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53G. If the applicant is of the opinion the consultant selected by the planning board has a conflict of interest or does not possess either an educational degree in or a related field at issue, or 3 or more years of practice in the field at issue or related field, the applicant can file an administrative appeal of the Board of Selectmen questioning the choice of consultant. If the administrative appeal is not decided upon by the Board of Selectmen within 1 month after filing the appeal, the consultant selected by the planning board shall stand. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section as the zoning board of appeals will review per 40B. And the planning board recommendation is that it's not applicable since the application under 40B is made to the zoning board of appeals. The fee structure for applications to the planning board do not obtain. Therefore, the waiver is unnecessary. The appropriate fees for this application will be determined by the ZBA. Section 2520, standards of adequacy. Streets within a subdivision shall be considered to provide adequate access if and only if complying with the standards established in these rules. Ways providing access to streets within a subdivision shall be considered to provide adequate access where, prior to construction on any lots, the applicant ensures that such access will be in compliance with the subdivision regulations for right-of-way width, pavement width, maximum grade, and site distance requirements applicable to ways within a subdivision. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section, as the Zoning Board of Appeals will review these plans under a comprehensive permit per Mass General Law 40B. The Planning Board recommendation is to deny. There is concern for providing access to the site for emergency situations. The town's rural character ought not be sacrificed to a developer's desire to reduce cost and time. And finally, section 2530, obligations. The board may require, as a condition of its approval of a subdivision plan, that the developer construct access ways to a width as required in these regulations, and that applicant make physical improvements within such way or compensate the town for the cost of such improvements in order to meet the standards specified above. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section, as the Zoning Board of Appeals will review per 40B, and the Planning Board recommendation is deny. There is concern for providing access to the site for emergency situations. The town's rural character ought not be sacrificed to a developer's desire to reduce cost and time.
Okay, anyone amongst the board with any comments or questions? No? Okay, Attorney Mitchell, do you have any comments on these?
Yes, so with regards to the 2260 and 2530, so the first and the third one that was read, we do believe that these are also administrative in nature. I've already provided you with the recommendations of Peter Williams and I on 2520. There's a little bit of a caveat to what we provided. Essentially, as I mentioned at the last meeting, it was to rewrite the language in this to reflect that streets would be provided as per the plans, and as per the comprehensive permit, rather than reference to the subdivision regulations or the subdivision rules. In addition to that, we would also add in sort of that administrative language to reflect that this would be per 40B. With regards to the planning board's comments, I don't believe that with this rewrite, there is any concern that, again, we'll get into the specifics of how the roadways may not be meeting exactly the planning board standards. And essentially that's with regards to width only. That's later on in these waiver requests. But I don't believe that as a whole, with the overall recommendations that we're making on the waiver requests, that there will be any waiver of the planning board's regulations for construction of streets or ways other than with regards to width and length of dead end streets. And Peter, if I'm wrong on that, feel free to chime in.
Go ahead, Peter, if you have any comments, you can go ahead, please.
Marguerite, I think you have it right, but I mean, the idea is that the construction, the actual, placement and thickness of pavements and preparation of the roads will conform to the subdivision requirements of the town.
And the other thing that I want to clear up too on what they were saying about the emergency way, I believe we already have letters from the fire department stating that this is all set on the widths, all of that stuff. And I also, one of the things that I remember when we were talking about 2520 was the only thing out, the infrastructure beneath the road was still going to meet Dayton standards for that. And it was just strictly with, like you're stating, Marguerite, that's what I have down.
And Greg, I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear. Did you say that that the fire board did say it was all set?
Well, you can ask Jonathan Gray, but I'm pretty sure the fire department has reached out to the board and stated that they've reviewed the drawing that has been stated to us, and they have no issue with the fire trucks getting structure. Emergency vehicles.
Jonathan Gray, does that sound familiar to you? I mean, it is ringing a bell.
It sounds familiar to me. I believe Marguerite can also speak to this. It was around the time that I was joining the board.
I believe
But I
so.
believe it, yeah, I believe it was, that's correct, that the fire chief saw the plans and submitted comments to the traffic engineer, peer review engineer, but it was resolved. So I don't believe there's anything outstanding there.
Okay, and Marguerite seemed to have, I assume, Marguerite, that's correct. You have no other issues with this, right?
I'm not positive if it's a written letter to the board or an email. That's what I'm trying to remember, but
I
there
believe
was
it was an email.
commentary from the fire chief. Or maybe it was even from the developer who spoke to the fire chief.
Have we
Yeah,
sent a new
they,
set of drawings over to them? Have we sent? a new
There
set of-
was no, and then the traffic engineer also did run, he ran some models of all emergency vehicles as well to ensure that they were able to maneuver around the site. And he was able to
Okay.
confirm that with the fire department apparatus, garbage trucks, school buses, et cetera.
Okay,
Based on the width of the streets. I think the only open issue for the fire department that I had in my notes was confirming with the fire chief whether or not the area behind the townhouses where there was a significant drop off of elevation was wide enough to access whatever emergency apparatus equipment that they needed. I know we spoke about this because they envisioned that they would probably set up in front of the townhouses and be able to reach around it. But I think that there was still a request as to whether or not there was any type of reinforcement of that area that might have been requested by the fire department that was different than what was being proposed. So I had in my notes that there was still going to be some follow-up, or we were going to have a condition that the developer would follow up with the fire department on this point.
okay, so Jonathan, if we can just note that, so we can add that to our list of, I guess, outstanding contacts that need to be made.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yep.
could,
Sure.
just on that
Yeah.
point and one other, and Greg can follow up on this as well, but I do recall the exchange on sufficiency of access around the buildings, and I believe we showed on the plan, Greg, access that was requested, and we showed that it would be a certain width, I believe it's 15 feet, with adequacy for the truck to get to the rear of the building if necessary. If it wasn't 15 feet, maybe it was 10 feet, but I believe we showed it on the plan. Greg, is that the case, or were we going to have that as a condition?
That is the case. I did have email exchange and a phone call with the fire chief previously, and he had requested the grass paved area.
Okay.
Couple grass paved areas next to the buildings, and those are on the plans.
And it shows, is it 15 feet? What is it?
Looking at it right now, I don't see this dimension. I believe it's somewhere around that 15 feet or so.
Yeah, so just the answer is this issue, the loop has been closed on this. There's no need to
Okay.
read, it's done. We
Okay.
closed it. So the second point I wanted to make was the previous conditions regarding hiring of consultants, modifications to plans. Those are instances where there are 40B regulations directly on point that dictate exactly how those processes are accomplished in the context of 40B. And although we're including that language that we talked about as far as administrative conditions, that 40B and the permits supersede the condition to the extent it's inconsistent, there were instances that I mentioned, Marguerite and I will work out that the specific reference is mentioned where 40B provides for a regulation that's directly on point. So we don't have to go line by line on those, but I wanted to point out that we just went through a few of them.
Okay,
And they
Also, there is about the roadway. We'll get into it further on probably waiver number 33, but the center line of the road is going to be less than the requirement. So that's another waiver.
okay,
What is
Sorry,
gonna,
I didn't hear the what of the road?
The center line radius,
Settling radius, thank you.
specifically in the cottage area and where those little loop roads are.
so has that changed since the fire chief has seen this drawing?
Nope.
Okay. And I do see where you do have the fire apparatus going into the, I guess you would call that the townhouses. And one of my concerns, again, that we were talking about on that was it's a 1-to-1 grade. On the back, it's rather steep, and we have at least a minimum of 15 feet from the structure to the start of the riprap going down in order to set up a ladder if they had to for getting up to the building.
Greg, I thought we had already talked about this and put it to bed.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that that's in the condition that that's taken care of on that.
Right.
Okay, excellent. So before we go into it, I just wanted to reiterate one more time, if there's anyone joining late for public input, the phone line during the meeting is 508-669-6431, extension 114, and you'll be reaching Carrie Easterday, the planning board office manager who is fielding calls for us. And the email will be to Jonathan Gray, our office manager, and his email is the letter J, gray@dayton-ma.gov. So that was once again for anybody joining late, ways to give any public input. So just as it's about 7 o'clock. Kerry and Jonathan Gray, have we had anything come in since then? Jonathan, do you have anything?
I don't believe so. Let me just
Okay.
check.
I just can't see Kerry. Was it a no she was giving us? I just have the.
I'm sorry. Yes, that was a no.
That's fine. I just have the plans in front of me, so I can't see you unless you make a noise. So.
I know my camera's not set up in the greatest way, but
Oh, it's okay.
no, I've gotten nothing yet.
Okay, sure, no problem. Just want to check in. All right, so Jonathan Gray, whenever you're ready to continue with the next waivers, you may.
Sure. All right, planning board rules and regulations, section 3310, submission. A definitive plan of a subdivision may be submitted by the subdivider to the board for review and approval, modification, or disapproval by the board. Notice of submission shall be provided to the town clerk in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81S. The submission of such a definitive plan shall be made on Form C, application for approval of a definitive plan. Any person submitting a definitive plan of a subdivision of land to the board for approval shall file therewith the following. And the applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section as the ZBA will review per 40B. And the planning board comment was that it's not applicable since the ZBA will be the approving body under Chapter 40B. The waiver is unnecessary. Section 3311. When the application is deemed complete and properly submitted by the planning board or its agent, it shall notify the town clerk in writing of the final submittal date. The final submittal date shall be the date that the completed and properly submitted application is received by the planning board or its agent. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section as the zoning board of appeals will review per 40B, and the planning board did not have a comment on that. And finally, section 3312, the applicant shall file by delivery or by registered mail written notice with the town clerk stating that a definitive plan has been submitted in accordance with General Law 41, Section 81T, as amended, with the date of submission of the definitive plan accompanied by a copy of the application form. And the applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section as the ZBA will review under 40B. And the planning board comment is that it's not applicable since the zoning board is the approving body under 40B. The waiver is unnecessary.
Okay, and just before we go on, Marguerite, obviously, if procedurally what I'm doing is out of line, please just let me know. But Jonathan, if you were looking at the batch of them, and if all three of the next ones you're about to read, the applicant requesting a waiver, if it's all for the same reasoning, instead of repeating the reasoning every time it's the same one, I'm fine with you just saying that the following three all have the same reason for waiving, unless Marguerite feels that we should reiterate that after every time we read one. What do you think, Marguerite?
That's fine, as long as it's made clear so that anyone listening understands what is being provided.
Okay, I'm just kind of noticing a trend for a lot of these. So obviously, Jonathan, if when we get to one that's a little bit different, then obviously by all means reiterate that it's a different reason as to why. But if they're all for the same reason, I don't think there's a need to. So if you want to, before each three, just make sure that's clear when we go into them.
Mr. Chairman, I would also point out on many of these, the planning board itself has noticed and noted that the provisions that have been read are not applicable. So to the extent the board feels the need to rewrite a not applicable section, just I'll raise our objection again, but there's a workaround. I just wanted to point out that the planning board itself is noting these aren't applicable.
Right, okay.
I mean,
Marguerite, do you?
again, I would say if that's the case, then there wouldn't need to be a waiver at all. The provision doesn't apply, so.
Okay,
Chris, I
then,
just, I don't think we need to go down this path right now, but we can. If you believe that this provision is of concern to you and you've requested a waiver, then I think we've reached agreement on how we can handle it. The planning board has said they don't believe this provision applies to this process. The zoning board has no problem saying that as well. I don't, unless the zoning board members want to tell me otherwise, I don't believe the zoning board members are comfortable waiving a provision. They would rather leave it alone if they feel that it doesn't apply.
I think they have to state that it doesn't apply, given the mechanism that we're employing, saying that we're going to rewrite some of the other ones. So we'll stick with the catch-all if it's still of a concern and the board doesn't want to take an alternative approach. We'll stick with the catch-all saying that 40B supersedes and the permit supersedes.
Okay, so the ones, Jonathan, is there more to read, or do we left off on what number? I'm sorry.
The last one that I read was 3312.
Okay, so is there any comment from any board members? And Marguerite, do you have anything in reference to these other than what was just stated, or no?
No, they all are considered administrative in my mind.
Okay, so Jonathan, if you want to carry on.
Sure. Section 3313, when a definitive plan of a subdivision is submitted to the planning board as provided in General Law 41, Section 81.0, a copy thereof shall be filed with the Board of Health. The Board of Health shall report in writing to the planning board its approval or disapproval of said plan and shall send a copy of its report to the person who submitted the plan. In reporting a disapproval, the Board of Health shall make specific findings as to which of the lots, if any, shown on the plan cannot be used for building sites without injury to the public health or is unsuitable because of drainage conditions, and shall specify the reasons therefore. Where possible, the Board of Health shall also make recommendations for the correction of the defects specified in its report. The Board of Health shall determine the extent of soil evaluation, which may include deep test holes, percolation tests, and test borings, and shall determine the number of tests to be required. The failure of the Board of Health to make its report within 45 days after the plan is submitted to its office shall be deemed to constitute an approval of the plan by that board. And also, at the time of the filing of the definitive plan, the applicant shall stake all proposed lots and mark proposed lot numbers on the lots for identification to facilitate review by the Board of Health. Review under 40B, applicant requests waiver. I'm just sort of looking, yeah. So I'm just going to make sure here that these are all the same reason the applicant's requesting waiver under 40B. Sorry, I lost my place here. Let's see. 3313. Okay, so, and the planning board recommendation was deny, the town cannot waive a state requirement. And then 3314, incomplete submissions. The board reserves the right to disapprove incomplete submissions at any time if, in its opinion, review of the plan is hampered by the absence of required information. In the event that complete plans are submitted to the board after opening a public hearing, the board may vote to disapprove the plan and return plans to the applicant as incomplete. The board shall cite those specific regulations with which the plan is not in compliance in a letter noting the reason for the board's action, which shall be filed with the town clerk. In the event of such disapproval, the board reserves the right to retain any filing or review fees. The planning board comment was that it's not applicable since the zoning board is approving body under 40B. And then section 3320 contents. The definitive plan shall be prepared by a registered professional engineer and or land surveyor and shall be clearly and legibly drawn in black India ink upon Mylar and shall be 24 inches by 36 inches in overall dimensions with a 1-inch margin left on one 24-inch edge of each sheet for filing purposes. The prints shall be at a scale of not less than 1 inch equals 40 feet or such other scale as the board may prescribe as adequate to show details clearly. Profiles of proposed streets shall be drawn to the same horizontal scale as the plan and with vertical scale 10 times larger unless otherwise permitted by the board on separate tracing cloth or Mylar of the same dimensions as the plan sheets. If multiple sheets are used to show the subdivision, they shall be accompanied by an index sheet showing the entire subdivision. The definitive plan shall show the following information, section K, acreage of each lot, lot lines, bearings, and length thereof in conformity with the zoning bylaw in each case. Section C, approximate proposed location of principal building on each lot to comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw whenever uncertainty exists upon the request of the Board of Health or the Conservation Commission. Section U, suitable space to record the action and signatures of the board members on each sheet of the definitive plan in the lower right-hand corner. Section W, test pit locations and logs witnessed by the Board of Health pursuant to 310 CMR 15, AKA Title 5, shall be shown with not less than 2 pits per lot. Section AA, an engineer's estimate of materials with quantities registered to construct quantities required to construct roadway, utilities, and appurtenances for plan as submitted. And the planning board comment on that was that it's not applicable since the zoning board of appeals is approving body under chapter 40B, waivers unnecessary.
All right, so we'll hold there because I think the next, I can tell by looking ahead, the next batch probably going to require more discussion than what we've been having so far. So is there any questions amongst the board on what was just read?
I have on 3313, I just want to make sure there's going to be some language in the waiver on that one. I just want to make sure that's on the record.
Anyone else? Attorney Mitchell?
So again, we do consider these to all be administrative as well. But in terms of the language that will be in the comprehensive permit condition, you're talking about having the Board of Health witness the test pits. Is there anything else specifically that you're also want to be sure is part of this?
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
So just quickly, I mean, we can talk more about the Board of Health witnessing issue later on. But I think there's one of those types of statements in 3320 that I think can be problematic if not specifically addressed, where it talks about test pit locations no fewer than 2 per lot being shown on the plan. And, you know, we don't want someone to come along a couple of years later and say, why don't you have 2 test pits on the plan? So specific note, you know, I don't think a global change goes there. I think the answer is I can take care of that offline with Attorney Mitchell.
Okay.
I don't mind tabling that and talking further with Attorney Augustino on that.
Okay, thank you. So Jonathan, if you want to go into the next one, just be clear, this one does have a different reason for the waiver. So Jonathan, these I would probably do at least the next 2 I definitely would do individually. Looks like they might yield more of a conversation. I could be wrong, but so if you want to just read the first one, so starting with 3340.
Sure. Section 3340, development impact statement. Waive this section in its entirety. is the request by the applicant. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section as the Zoning Board of Appeals will review these plans under a comprehensive permit per Mass General Law, Chapter 40B. The applicant requests a waiver to this section as the project will be designed in compliance with the DEP Stormwater Management Regulations, DEP Wetlands Protection Act, and its regulations. The roadway infrastructure will be sufficient to support the proposed project as shown on the plan. Additionally, a traffic study will be provided for town review. And the planning board comment is to deny. The impact statement is a necessary tool for the town to have in its planning to accommodate the increase of on-call services. The plan also requires the applicant to demonstrate its plan to preserve the environment and to promote public safety. The plan should remain a requirement. Do we want to just discuss this one or move on?
Is there any discussion on this one, guys? No, Attorney Mitchell, do you have anything on this one?
Yes, so, and I'll let Peter Williams is welcome to add to whatever I have to say. He and I did discuss this one in depth. In light of the planning board's recommendation, we went back and looked at what the board has done in prior 40Bs. You have not required a development impact statement process to be followed with any other prior 40Bs, in large part because of the way that Chapter 40B's process plays out. So you already have had preliminary traffic reports reviewed by a traffic engineer. The developer still has to comply with the DEP stormwater management regulations and will be following up with the Conservation Commission. Many of the other planning procedures are happening by virtue of both the initial issuance of the comprehensive permit and then the final review procedures that will happen before a building permit is able to be issued. So that will be addressed specifically within the comprehensive permit by conditions. I think because we're pretty comfortable with how this board is very specific with what it requires prior to issuance of a building permit and its comprehensive permit conditions, we feel that the board does cover through its conditions and through what otherwise exists in the 40B process, everything that would otherwise be in the development impact statement process. So we are actually agreeing that this be waived in its entirety.
Okay. All right, Jonathan, so you want to go right to the next one?
Sure. 3410, on-site wastewater disposal. Notwithstanding section 3313, a permit to construct an individual sewage disposal system for sanitary wastewater disposal shall be obtained from the Board of Health for each individual lot prior to the issuance of a building permit. A condition shall be recorded on the definitive plan as follows. Quote, no building or structure shall be built or placed upon any lot without a permit from the Board of Health, end quote. The applicant requests a waiver to this section as the project will be on town sewer. The planning board recommendation is to deny unless approval has been rendered by the sewer department.
All right, any comments, guys?
I feel the same way.
As what? As the planning board?
Until we get some more information from the sewer department, and I remember there was a concern, we didn't have the station down the road was inadequate to pump enough volume. I'm confident with Bishop's study that he done. I just want to make sure the sewer department and his council and all them guys talk with the sewer department. But there's some language we could put in that one.
Attorney Mitchell, do you think we have, is there anything, is there anything outstanding that we're waiting for? I didn't think that there was.
Or from who? The
From
sewer department?
sewer. Yeah.
I know that there was conversation about doing a follow-up water flow test with the water department.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if the sewer department, I'd have to go back and double check their comments. They may have still been waiting to review the final plans.
When we met over in the middle school, the sewer department was saying that the stations, we might have to do a station on their project and all that stuff. I just want to make sure that this is hashed out with the sewer department.
Right.
Okay.
So as I'm looking at their March 10th letter, which I believe is up on your website, Jonathan,
Yep.
they did indicate that they haven't received enough information to make a decision about the availability of sewer for Strawberry Fields at that time. And that connections to the system as well as discharges to the public sewer system should be made solely by the commissioners. Later on, I believe there's some sewer department regulations that have been mentioned as potential waivers by the developer, but I don't think that they're looking to somehow have the zoning board of appeals or the regulations, the building regulations of the sewer department be somehow waived. I think they're planning to comply with all the building regulations of the sewer department, and it may just simply be more of the 40B procedural elements that the sewer commissioners don't technically make the final
Okay.
approval. They provide guidance to the zoning board, and the zoning board gives the final approval.
Right.
But I think that they're willing to comply with that process through the final permit, final design plan review procedures. And I guess maybe if this helps to speak to the actual waiver request here. So the suggestion that both Peter Williams and I have to address the planning board's concern would be that this provision does get waived, but that a condition with the following wording would be added to the comprehensive permit. And that would be that a permit to construct an individual sewage disposal system for sanitary wastewater disposal shall be obtained from the Board of Health for each individual lot prior to issuance of a building permit, unless the lot will be served by town sewer. This way, if for some reason they're not going to be utilizing town sewer, then they will have to get a permit from the Board of Health. But if they are instead using town sewer, then they won't have to follow this process because they won't be needing it. And I understand the developer is okay with that type of a condition being added.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. And there, if you look in the proposed conditions, are separate conditions for water and sewer that speak to those processes. So for this waiver request, Marguerite's language makes sense.
Okay. All right, so we can move on to the next one, Jonathan. If you want to scroll ahead, it looks like if you want to read the other, at least two, I think are the same reason. So if you want to do that, that's fine.
Okay, also, can someone remind me which waiver we've already discussed at the previous meeting last week, so I don't reread that?
Yep.
You already did, Jonathan. We're past it.
Oh, 2250, yeah, and yeah.
Okay. All right, sure. All right, so section 3430 regarding public hearing. Upon receipt of a properly executed application form approved by the planning board together with the definitive plan, the planning board will set a date for the required public hearing. Notice of the public hearing shall be given in accordance with requirements in General Law 41, Section 81T. Before approval of the definitive plan is given, a public hearing shall be held by the planning board. Notice of the time and place of which and of the subject matter sufficient for identification shall be given by the planning board by advertisement in a newspaper of general circulation in the town once in each of the 2 successive weeks, the first publication being not less than 14 days before the day of the hearing. A copy of said notice shall be mailed by certified mail to the applicant and to all owners of land submitted on Form D, certified list of abutters. And the applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section, as the Zoning Board of Appeals will review these plans under a comprehensive permit, Chapter 40B. And their request is also the same on the next one as well. And on section 3430, the one I just read, the planning board comment was that it's not applicable since the Zoning Board of Appeals is the approving body under Chapter 40B. The waiver is unnecessary. The next section is section 3440, revisions. Any revision to the originally filed definitive plan must be submitted 14 days prior to any continuation of the hearing. And the planning board comment is that it's not applicable since the Zoning Board of Appeals is approving under Chapter 40B, the waiver is unnecessary.
Okay, any comments on these guys? Marguerite, anything?
The first one, our comment was originally that was administrative and we would agree to handle this through the administrative process we've talked about. We had questions on the second one. Originally, Peter Williams and I didn't feel that we agreed with that waiver request being necessary. Some of my communication with Attorney Augustino happened as late as this afternoon, so I wasn't able to completely review each of these individually with him. So he's provided me with a response on that. So I guess I would just say, let's table that. It may be something we can handle administratively to resolve this, but let's table that one for now, please.
Okay. All right, Jonathan, if you want to scroll ahead, let's see what we got. It's about 7:30, so we're looking about probably at least a half hour left. We're about a quarter of the way through with reading it. I believe there are 97, I think, Jonathan, is that correct? That sound about right?
Say that again for me.
There are about 97, I believe, waivers total.
That sounds, it's in the 90s for sure.
95, yeah. So we're about a quarter of the way through. So if you want to go ahead and read, it looks like the next three, at least, yeah, the next three, the next one's quite long, but they're all the same reasons and the planning board's comments as well too.
Yep, so I'll just say that applicant requests a waiver to the following three provisions because it's under 40B, and the same reasoning for the planning board is that it's not applicable for the next three since the zoning board of appeals is the approving body under chapter 40B. So that's sort of the disclaimer for the next three. 3450 decision. After the public hearing, the board in due course will approve, modify, and approve or disapprove the definitive subdivision plan submitted. Criteria for action by the board shall be the following. A, completeness and technical adequacy of all submissions. B, determination that development at this location does not entail unwarranted hazard to safety, health, and convenience of future residents of the development or of others because of possible natural disasters, traffic hazard, or other environment degradation. Section C, conformity with the requirements of these rules in compliance with the zoning bylaw. And D, determination based upon the development impact statement where submitted that the subdivision as designed will not cause substantial and irreversible damage to the environment, which could be avoided or ameliorated through an alternative development plan. Section 3460, mandatory conditions. Any definitive plan approved by the planning board shall contain the following conditions. And then section 3461, endorsement. Failure by the applicant to obtain the endorsement of the planning board within 6 months of the date of the approval of the definitive plan shall result in the automatic rescission of this approval. The time for such endorsement may be extended for not more than 1 year upon the written request of the applicant for good cause shown prior to the expiration of said 6-month permit and upon a vote of the majority of the planning board.
Okay, is there any comments, guys, on these?
On 3450, I'm okay with it. I just think there's some language that needs to be done between the councils, and I just want to make my comment on that.
Go ahead, John. Greg, go ahead.
Oh, what do you want me to say for language?
Oh, yeah, wait, I guess what line specifically were you
Well,
referring to?
I'm not, I mean, it's common sense, but I wouldn't want to have this all relieved when you got hazard, safety, and health concerns in this matter.
Okay, Marguerite, can you maybe shed some light on the wording of that and have if there's been any change in potential language on that one?
Why don't I table that a little bit further? I'm sorry, as I'm looking at this, I know Peter Williams and I had a lot of conversation about this. Our rules and regulations, the Zoning Board of Appeals rules and regulations apply to the provisions of this, and I believe they cover, but I will want to go back and double check what Mr. Logan said. Concerns around traffic hazard and other environmental degradation. So I think that all of that already is covered by chapter 40B or the zoning board's rules and regulations. So I would suggest we table this, and I'm actually going to suggest we table the next two as well at this stage, because again, these are provisions that I had asked for more information or made a proposed recommendation that it looks like the developer has some more feedback on. for
I
me.
think
So
we
I
could-
think I need to just talk to Attorney Augustino.
Well,
further on.
so some of, Marguerite, just some of these are ones that I think the board could actually provide input on this evening. Like timeline for plan submissions and that sort of thing, to the extent definitive plan is, I don't know what the board considers the definitive plan has been referenced in all these so-called administrative conditions, but definitive plan, as we've discussed, is a term of art under the subdivision control law. So I'd like to have some discussion with the board, because these were actually ones that I think, to the extent we're going to not waive them, which originally I thought 3450 would be waived, which I thought is appropriate. But to the extent we're not going to, I think there are things here for the board to make sure we all are on the same page for, and I think it will also help us in crafting conditions. So just to that point, on 3450, 40B has a standard relative to, geez, Zach, sorry, that looked like a bottle of whiskey you just had.
No, I see.
What? Wow. Anyway, no, what I was just going to say was, the answer to 3450 is a waiver, because as Marguerite pointed out, the zoning board's bylaw is different under 40B, and the standards for health and safety is different under 40B. So
The only reason why I brought it up, Chris, we still have a water, again, I know you want to hear about, we still have a water issue in the sewer department with the volume. I just want to make sure some language is in there upon review of that's all I'm saying. I'm not talking about
sure.
anything else.
No, I think the answer then is that we should discuss that in the conditions.
Yes.
We should discuss that when we get to the conditions. So hopefully we can decide now that we will make sure that these issues are addressed in the conditions. But the answer, on the last iteration I saw was concur that a waiver is appropriate. So, I think we can close the loop on, we waive this one and we'll deal with it in the conditions.
So again, as you know, I mentioned to you, Attorney Augustino, I had prepared potential responses, but I have not shared all of them with the Zoning Board of Appeals, because these were prepared several months ago, actually, and some information has changed since then. So I was planning on providing recommendations, as I've been doing verbally, to the board. You are correct that what I sent you did say concur, but I'm listening to Member Logan present his concerns, and it just made sense to me that that would be one that we could talk further about afterwards. So we could be clear exactly what conditions we're going to be including, and I can go back and review everything that he had concerns on. And then with regards to number 22 and number 23, as I said, I just received your comments back late this afternoon. I have not had a chance to review them. I know they mentioned some of what you said around timelines, but I'd rather have this conversation at the next meeting and just table this so we can address the ones but if you want to try to have some time to instead put this on hold and talk about these right now in a lot of detail.
Well, the concern is, the chairman mentioned that we're a quarter of the way through these. My client is a saint. If I could just get that on the record, he's being extraordinarily patient in the procedures that the board has chosen to apply and going line by line with these waivers. And I commend him for being patient, but I don't see us finishing this process in a reasonable amount of time following the state of emergency if we can't just have a discussion now and come to some finality with regard to something like, whether we can waive this and just address it in the conditions, or I don't know what. I don't know what the other alternative would be as far as rewriting, this particular standard regarding, the board's findings. I mean, this is essentially, this should be in the findings section of a permit. The board has to make findings, and they're going to say, We've received sufficient information. We understand that the standard under 40B is imperil health and safety. We don't feel as though this project imperils health and safety. It's consistent with local needs to waive certain provisions of the bylaw. It shouldn't take tabling this and further discussion among council at great expense to the applicant. And keep that in mind, that the applicant is funding everyone to be on this call at this point, which is part of 40B is the delayed process. I think we can, I'd like to think we can get to a conclusion here. And a conclusion that we will address this in conditions. That's the answer. Waive it, and we should address it in conditions.
Attorney Mitchell, how do you feel?
I've shared my piece and my recommendation.
Does the board have any opinion?
Well, my thought on this, Chris, is that I worked on the same project in the last one, like I mentioned to you before. And the procedure that you're seeing right now is actually going faster than the last one that we've done. I'm sorry it's not at the speed that you would like. I understand where your concern is about we have to do in the conditions. I'm just bringing up my concern. So when we do go to this, Marguerite has a chance to go over what my concerns are, or anyone else on the board, so that, or then you two can sit back and talk about the conditions, what we're going to put in for the conditions. I'm not against the waivers. I just want to make sure I speak my behalf on a few matters, because there is a lot of things at this point we're going forward. There's a lot of things that are not filled in 100%. We still don't know if we have adequate water pressure for you. We still don't know about the sewer line. I remember the volume of the sewer that we're talking about it. I'm going to follow up with that before our next meeting that we set up. I'm going to reach out to the sewer department and find out what's going on with that on my own. I just want to make sure that these few things, that's the only reason why I brought that up on 3450. It was strictly about the water and sewer. I mean, I just want to make sure the language is in there with the condition. That's all I'm stating on that matter.
If that's the answer, I can tell you with 110% certainty that there will be extensive detailed conditions in the permit. What usually happens is a waiver is granted, and based on the local bylaw that was waived, a permit condition is crafted. And my ask to the board, so that we can finish this one and move on, is can we decide that that's an appropriate process for this particular one, so that we can cross 21 off and be done with it? Can we agree that we will address these issues in the permit? I don't think we need to address this as a modified local bylaw. Let's waive it and make sure we address it in the permit. That's the ask. And, I leave it to the board and its counsel, but
I'm going to leave that with Marguerite, but I do want to follow up with something. Peter Karen was chairman a while back, and this is how we've done it. We've always talked about what your waiver is. Then we talk about some type of condition. So Marguerite gets our input, and then Marguerite at that point returns, and then you two talk about this. And then when we get into it, this is the way the procedure's been ever since I've been on the board. I'm not willing to change the procedure for the board, but I'm only one member speaking. I'm willing to work with you in any way I can, but Marguerite does have some questions and concerns that she wants to review, and I feel confident the council has the right to do that. And if she wants to speak on any of this, I think she should.
And I know, like, one thing I discussed too with Marguerite was that, but especially with the medium and way which we were conducting this meeting, I don't want to risk the town being subject to any open law meeting violations. I mean, Marguerite and Peter Karen, I'm sure you can probably attest to, what, if any, kind of risk we could be at if we decide to not go about it the way we're doing it. Would you guys agree or disagree? I mean, if you guys disagree, by all means, please tell me. I mean, how do you feel?
So, I mean, I think this is more of a disagreement between council as far as the application of the law and concerns about how the open meeting law works. So you're entitled to follow the advice of counsel that you're receiving from Attorney Mitchell. I don't have a concern with not reading these line by line, summarizing certain things. And I also don't have a concern with the idea that, this board can be advised that we can waive this and craft the condition in the permit without jeopardizing the board's rights. And we are following the procedure. I think we've already conceded that we will follow the procedure. We're following the procedure. We're going line by line. We've conceded that. Over our objections, we've conceded that point because this is the board's process that they employ, that council has advised the board that is appropriate. We've stated our objection. My only point was I'd like to at least be able to cross these off. But if we want to table it and come back to it later, we will continue to, go along to get along to the extent we can. But I, having not been involved in those other hearings, I think a lot of this is just this particular board's preference based on the advice of counsel in many instances. And this board can make, a determination for themselves if there are disagreeing opinions as to how these things can work. But, I've said my piece again. I'm expressing some of Bisher's frustration with the amount of time that's going into this on things that shouldn't necessarily require that much time. Ultimately, the open meeting law does not result in invalidation of a permit necessarily. So I think that's a false concern. I think this board's gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure that everyone has access to this. And frankly, I think, you're beyond the requirements, but we'll continue to follow the board's direction on this. It's just, I have to express my client's frustration, and I'd like to think that we could at least check these off.
Okay, Peter, Karen, can you make any feedback on this? As you've been with these?
Yeah, I think with what Chris is saying, I think we can plow through it. I don't think there's a reason not to. We're not under any kind of time restraints as far as your concerns with open meeting laws, or are we going to run out of time?
It's not so much timing. It's more of the what I was discussing with Marguerite was I don't want to just say, all right, guys, 3460, yes or no, move on, and have people, the public, being like, what do you guys just, what are we listening to? What are you guys just waiving and not telling us, or potentially waiving, I should say, and not telling us?
Right.
That was the issue of my concern, not so much the time. I mean, yes, that is a factor, of course, but
I'd rather see us address it now and move on.
Okay. Greg or Michelle, I mean, do you guys have any feedback on this before we do that?
As long as Marguerite is comfortable with the language in that particular thing, I'm okay with it. Like I said, I just had a few concerns on it. That was about it for me.
Right. And I agree with your concerns, Greg.
Michelle, do you have any comments?
No, I mean, I'm just, honestly, I'm listening to what I consider to be the expert and just taking it all in, but I'm going to obviously go with what I believe Dayton's council is suggesting. I mean, that's the way I'm going to lean, especially towards what, Greg Logan says and Peter Karen, because they've been through this before. So, yeah, so that's basically my input on all of these.
Okay, so that being said, I think personally I'm comfortable with it being addressed in the conditions. Marguerite,
Can you clarify for me, Mr. Logan, what specific words you want to make sure there's conditions about? Because I want to make sure I don't miss that.
My major concerns is we have unanswered questions on water supply, so that they're asking to have this waived, which again, I don't think it matters in this particular wordage, because they have to have it regardless at the end. Is hazard, safety, and health. We don't offer water or sewer, the health issue becomes a situation. I think it could be answered later down the road. I'm not stating that. Those were my concerns. It was pretty much the water and sewer on this situation, and pretty much that.
Well, I'm going to make a note that I will let you know which are the specific water and sewer conditions. that when we get to the point of reviewing the conditions and ensure that you're comfortable with that.
Right, I agree with that.
And
Okay,
if that's the case, then that would mean that this would be an actual wholesale waiver. So I guess I'm going to also make a note that we go back and take a look at this language at that time,
Okay,
so
That
that
sounds
you are all
perfect.
comfortable.
okay,
That sounds great.
excellent. All right, so Jonathan, let's bang out a few more of these.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, for the
You
other
got it.
two,
yes.
I don't think you had, so again, I had actually recommended that you not waive 3440. Attorney Augustino has written back to me on that, and I had, I'm sorry, you're not at 3440. I've lost my place too.
3461.
3460.
Yep.
And then 3461, I had suggested that that be handled administratively, and I see a note from Attorney Augustino on that. I haven't had a chance to review either of those notes yet. So I don't know. Again, I'm more than willing to talk about it right now. He can share verbally what his concern
Sure,
is.
I'd appreciate doing that. So
Yep.
this is right out of the subdivision control law, under the state subdivision control law, that certain things need to happen with respect to a definitive plan. And again, that's a defined term.
Mhm.
Once it is presented to, or how it's presented to the zone, to the planning board, how the planning board endorses it, and then the timeline within which the plan gets finally approved by the planning board. Since in 40B, we don't have what's referred to as a definitive plan, we have what is traditionally referred to as the preliminary plan that this board approves now, and then we come back with the final plan, okay? This bylaw says that the applicant shall obtain endorsement of the definitive plan within 6 months of approval. So my concern was that if that is left in as a condition somehow, or as a local bylaw, that someone might say, well, you didn't complete your final approval within 6 months. So do you appreciate, you appreciate the concern there? There's a 6-month timeline that's stated from, and it's a vestige of the subdivision control law. So we asked for a waiver of that local bylaw, because again, since we're preserving all these, we can't leave any stone unturned, since we're leaving them in. So if that's going to be left in, we need just an explicit statement that it does not apply to approval of the final plan, which is going to be handled in a condition in the permit. There's going to be a whole section in the permit that talks about what permits we have to get. We have to get our order of conditions. Then we have to go back to the zoning board for approval of the final plans. I just want to make sure you don't expect us to do that within 6 months. And if we leave this here or amend it and say the zoning board shall administer this, someone might read it and say, well, you missed your 6 months. So we're asking for a waiver from that. We asked for a waiver of that. This could be handled in the administrative sense and make it absolutely explicitly clear that this does not apply. I think what I would like to hear is the board's charge to Marguerite is, Marguerite, figure this out with Chris, make sure that they don't get hung up on a 6 months deadline, and we'll work it out in the conditions, similar to what we just did with the water sewer. This should be a condition as to how that final plan approval process works. And frankly, there's never a deadline on it. The deadline is that we start construction within 3 years of this approval, or the approval that we might get. That's the deadline. That's generally the only deadline. So hopefully, can we get an understanding on this one so that we can check it off and then move to the next one?
I do understand, Greg. How about you?
I'm okay with it as long as Marguerite understands that, it is like you say, 3 years before you even know. You have to start within 3 years. Can't expect you to have everything in 6 months from the date of that. I'm okay with that.
Oh yeah, Greg. I agree with you unless I'm missing something completely.
No, I think it's only going to be in the applicant's best interest to get it ASAP. So I agree with it.
Okay, Marguerite, how do you feel?
Again, this one was the one that we had suggested we address through the administrative language that we had already agreed on, which would say that the 40B process would control. I had suggested tabling it because Attorney Augustino provided me with some responses to that recommendation, which I assume related to all of this. And now as I listen to him, he's suggesting that the board asked that I go back and work with him on this condition, which is exactly what I was recommending right now.
Right.
So I'm just trying to understand.
No, but I mean, to make sure.
I'm fine.
Sorry, to make sure that we don't have to have this in front of the board again. I think the answer is, and by the way, as far as the global solution, I did mention that there were some specific instances where I had a heightened concern about things like deadlines or specific procedures. So the global solution coupled with some specific language, bottom line is I think we're okay on this one and we never have to talk about it again. We'll figure it out. We're good to go.
Again, Chris, I don't disagree that we have some things we still need to finalize in terms of the actual language, which I would hope to do in the next week or so with you so that we can actually show the board what that language will look like the next time. That being said, you know, the anything that the board asked me to go back and talk to you about, they're going to want to hear the resolution of that. So I'm a little confused as to what it is, other than I understand you're frustrated. I know that frustration is based on what you've been sharing for the last 2 meetings. I'm trying to be respectful of your overall concern that we not spend time talking about things we don't need to talk about. If we could maybe potentially have further conversations ourselves and bring it back to the board resolved. I too believe that we could easily try to resolve this between ourselves in a way that I can make a recommendation to the board that addresses the board's concerns and hopefully is agreeable to you or your client. That being said, I guess I'm just not sure why you think that we can resolve this right now if you're asking that we resolve it not right now.
No, I think it's been, my point was this exchange started with council suggesting, let's just table these and move on. And I thought it was important to say, whoa, hold on. Let's tell the board what the issue is, get a sense of their feelings on this, which I received. Thank you very much. And now we can go and finish it. And I think Attorney Mitchell heard the board's sentiment as well, that this 6 months is not applicable. So all I was concerned about from a drafting perspective is I need to make sure that no one calls me up and says, you didn't do this in 6 months. And council and I have an understanding on that. But I thought it was important just to bring to the board's attention this issue now. We've done that. I think we can move to the next one. So the next one, and John, did you have a chance to read this one?
No, I have not yet.
Don't believe he did, no.
So
I
I
think
think
you
Marguerite had
skipped one.
suggested tabling it. I'd like to have a discussion about this one because this is substantive.
Actually, I
Chris?
suggested tabling the one before.
Okay. Well,
My
let's-
recommendation was for number 22, 3460, that we table that one because the recommendation I was planning to make to the board is not to waive it at all. And you had come back with a rationale as to why you felt that at least this should be administratively waived. So if you want to talk about that, Chris, right now, I haven't provided any recommendation to the board on number 24 or 23. What are we at? 24. Sorry.
23 was the one regarding
The
the
one we
6
just talked about, yes. Attorney Augustino went out of order when we started this conversation.
Oh,
I apologize.
I am out of order.
so
Not in that sense.
No, I
No
hear you.
pun intended.
I know.
So- go ahead, Attorney Augustino. Is there anything specific you wanted to address for 3460?
3460 was the header section. So it's
Okay.
it's a header. It was
Okay, so Jonathan, if you want to go ahead to 3462.
Sure. Section 3462, completion, failure by the applicant to complete the construction of the ways and the installation of the services shown on the definitive subdivision plan within 3 years of the date of endorsement shall result in the automatic rescission of this approval. The time for such construction and/or installation may be extended upon the written request of the applicant for good cause shown prior to the expiration of said 3-year period and upon a vote of the majority of the planning board. A schedule of completion shall be submitted to the planning board for approval before beginning construction. The developer shall adhere to the schedule provided. Development projects shall not extend over 3 winter seasons without complete infrastructure unless otherwise approved by the planning board. Any development exceeding this limit without the installation and functioning of all infrastructure must provide additional bonding. In the alternative, the board may restrict the sale of remaining uncommitted lots and/or the issuance of building permits on those lots without foundations in place. And they request a waiver as per 40B, and the planning board comment is not applicable since the zoning board is approving body under 40B.
Okay, any discussion to be had?
I'm okay with the waiver with a condition about the bond being brought into that particular area, and obviously we'd get into that later on the conditions, but I just want to make sure that there's some information on that.
Yep.
And the top coat, how long is the base coat is to be down? That's something Peter Williams can put into the condition, as well as how long the binder is good for before they do the top coat. Because if the town's going to accept the roads, do not want a problem. We have one problem with one of them now.
Peter Williams, do you have anything to go off of that?
Not at this moment. I agree. We'll add that information.
Okay. Attorney Mitchell?
Yes, we agree that a condition about scheduling the project after final approval of the final construction plans needs to be included. And that the information, as Peter mentioned, about the timing for various construction of the ways will be included as well. So in light of that, we would agree this should be waived in its
Okay.
entirety.
Yep.
Marguerite and Mr. Logan, can you just refresh my memory as to when you say a scheduling condition, what has this board done in the past? Because obviously, under Chapter 40B, projects are generally larger, more complex, and they don't tend to work well with deadlines for completion. And this local bylaw purports to have deadlines for completion. Under 40B, generally, it's consistent with market conditions, and you'll report to the board along a certain timeline. But what has this board previously done, just so that we can get ahead of that issue?
Yeah, Greg and Peter, Karen, if you have any feedback on that, because I know you guys have been through that.
I'll let Peter go first, and I'll tell you my concern.
I lost the condition. Can you show it back up again?
It's still on the screen.
Yeah, 3462. So like I stated, I'm not talking about like our bylaw says 3 years. We had a situation with another 40B project, and the binder coat was exposed for a long period of time. I'm not saying that's going to happen in this particular 40B project.
Right.
My concern was that if the town's going to accept the road, I want to make sure that the binder coat is adequate and still withstanding, and that's something that Peter Williams or someone that can help you out with that on that end. Is still adequate before we go, and I just want some verbiage in there. That's all I'm stating on that.
Yeah, that's perfectly appropriate. Yeah, that's normal. That's a good condition to have. What I'm concerned about is a condition says, Fisher, you shall complete construction of the entire project within 4 years. And Fisher's a great builder and developer, but you never know what happens. So I just want to make sure, I don't know, has the board imposed those types of conditions before? I don't recall seeing it in prior permits. We're happy to include the condition that Mr. Logan mentioned regarding the base coat, because we want it to be in good condition, and we as builders do as well. But I want to make sure this doesn't turn into a surprise condition that says we got to build the whole thing in a certain period of time.
You're doing it in phases, if I'm not mistaken, right? We're gonna do
Correct,
phase
yeah,
1
yeah.
first. And I understand construction goes into phase 2, and some of the binder can't be down right away. I understand how the construction end works. But I just don't want to see this dragged out for 6, 7 years. And we start to lose the binder coat. I want something in there on that end of it. And I understand the economy could drop. I do get it, but that's why we have bonds on the properties. But Peter Williams is really good about this. He's right on top of it. He definitely makes sure that happens for you.
We can't
So-
have a Stonegate on our hands.
There's the word.
Chairman,
I wasn't throwing it out there, but there's,
Well,
You said it, not me.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Bishop.
Yes, actually, I mean, I'm a little puzzled here because there was a restriction on that I only build so many units per year, so it lasts like 7 years or so. So on one hand, I'm supposed to slow it down, and on the other hand, I'm supposed to speed it up. I'm kind of confused. And-
I do understand his confusion, and Peter and Greg, I'll turn to you guys on that.
And I would like to add another thing, please.
Yep.
The Pines was in existence with a binder coat for 9 years.
right.
Then I picked up the binder coat being in existence does Stony Ridge, which is also which you know, we started from scratch. It's been 5 years now, so I don't know why we need to have this limit. It all depends on the market. It all depends, you know, as long as the construction is a solid, verified, good construction. I'm talking about the infrastructure. Why put the limit on it? And as it is, I'm not allowed to build on anything unless there is security in terms of lots or surety, you know.
well, we could put, like I stated, Bishop, in this particular case, I understand what you're up against on that, but if you're turning on, like you, from what I understand, is everything but maybe 2 sections of this project of handing it over to the town doesn't want to take any responsibility if the project below that, anything infrastructure that's in below fails, and then we take on responsibility. Now that's our problem. That's where we're trying to stop. And trust me, I'm not saying that the binder coat has to be covered in 3 years. That's what's in the wording here as of completion. But maybe Peter Williams can answer a little better how long a binder coat is actually adequate before it starts to fail. That's the concerns, because we also, you got to realize, you know, we live in New England. We have multiple, we got cold, frost, things like that can change the base of before you put a top coat. And I understand, Bishop, you got a lot of concerns with the trying to put a top coat on a development when it's still construction going on. And that's something we're going to talk about later, and how we're going to adequately start at phase 1, how the entrance and exit's going to be, and when we're going to jump into phase 2 and how that's going to be as well. Those are things we can talk about later as we get into it. But I just wanted to, I'm not against, personally, I'm not against this 3462. I'm just saying some of my concerns, but
Bishop, when you did the Pines, you had come back to us and asked if you could put the infrastructure all the way through. This was about halfway through the project because you had the equipment there. What is your plan for putting the infrastructure in this project? Are you just going to go phase by phase, or are you thinking?
We did submit a plan phasing for phasing. We did submit a plan.
Right, but I mean, with the Pines, it was because you had the equipment there that you came to us and asked if you could bump up the phasing, not of the houses, but of just the infrastructure.
Right.
So what is your plan for this? Are you looking to put the infrastructure through in prior to the, you know, not completing the phasing, but putting the road in?
This is really difficult for me to give you a decision on it now, because it all depends on once the road is all approved, the site, I'm going to send it out for bid.
Yeah.
And then once those contracts come back, then I'll make a decision, because sometimes you only add, you know, 20% of the cost to do 50% more, the 100% of the job. You
Right.
know, if the equipment is there, sometimes it works out that way. Sometimes, and that is because you have to have the drainage or the sewer to all of it. You know, like if there's a pump station at the end of the project, you have to put it all the way to the end. Might as well, if you're going to do that, pave the whole thing.
Right.
So
I think in the past 40 Bs that the one that we got burned on was an inferior sub road to begin with. I don't believe that he ever. Well, I mean, I don't want to get into it.
No,
I would really appreciate if you don't compare me to others.
No,
No.
no, I'm just saying that I see Greg's concern. That's all.
Yeah, and the other thing, Bishop, let's just, you are saying the cottages hit to a certain age group, and the townhouses are for another age group. So you're kind of limiting yourself to that two groups, not starting phase two, if you got what I'm saying.
Oh, I understand you completely. And my plan was to do all of them together until I was limited to a certain number of units per year.
I understand. I know what you're saying, but I'm just saying, oh geez, I don't want a cottage. I want something over there. If that infrastructure isn't in and ready.
The advantage that I got in doing those three different typology of housing is to appeal to three different markets, which
Right.
would accelerate the construction, which will finish the project sooner, which will, it's a return on investment sooner.
Yeah, because I
Right.
see we got 6 of the regular homes in phase one, and the rest of it's cottages and townhouses.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's where I was getting. I mean, I see you bringing both roads in.
Right. Exactly.
You know, but the only reason why I'm saying is like Peter Karen has stated, I'm not throwing you as a situation, but the town has got stuck with an inadequate road. And I'm not saying you're going to build that, but I just don't want to, do all this work and then the infrastructure below the top coat has failed because we can't finish the project. And that's where we're going to be holding the houses for bond, and Peter Williams is going to work on that for the next meeting. Hopefully we'll have some kind of answers.
If I'm relieved from the condition of so many units per year, I was gonna go do the whole thing altogether and hit 3 markets, and in 3 years or 4 years I'll be out of there. And the whole project.
That's another concern we have in the town as well. Again, with the water, again, it's multiple.
It cuts both ways. Yeah, I think
It's a tough spot right here.
I'm glad we talked through this a little bit and got some sense of what the concerns are, and you've heard the applicant's concern. I think the proposed answer at this point is concur. We'll negotiate a scheduling order in the permit, and it can address all those issues. So I think we've had a good discussion on that one. I think that's,
phasing certainly works both ways.
yeah,
It
right.
works for the town as far as us handling the extra traffic for schools and police and fire requests, and it also benefits you. So
I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
The phasing. I'm okay with the phasing, but don't expect me to finish it. Don't put a condition on me to finish it in 3 years. But
Yeah.
why not?
No, I definitely not. We're not saying that, Fisher, at all.
No.
I wouldn't even consider that.
So Attorney Mitchell, are you content with that discussion?
I think we can draft a condition that will take into account the phasing plan, be respectful to that, but also address the concerns of the board around making sure that we have sufficient infrastructure in place. So that if it goes longer than anticipated, you're still not getting a sub-quality product that was presented to the town for acceptance.
I agree. All right, Jonathan, I think we can bang out a couple more before we talk about the next hearing and public input.
Sure. Section 3600, endorsement and recording in its entirety. The applicant requests waiver under 40B. Planning board recommendation is not applicable since zoning board is approving under chapter 40B. The waiver is unnecessary. Waiver number 26, the amendment, modification, or rescission of approval. The planning board may, upon its own motion, the request of the applicant or the petition of any interested party, amend, modify, or rescind the approval of a definitive plan after due notice and opportunity to the owner to be heard in accordance with General Law 41, Section 81W, as amended. Failure to comply with these rules and regulations and with the specifications and conditions set forth in the approval of the definitive plan shall constitute a basis for such action by the planning board. Such action may include the realization upon any security posted by the applicant, the rescission of subdivision approval, and all other measures provided by law. No changes or alterations shall be made to any aspect of an approved definitive plan without resubmission for approval of the planning board in accordance with General Law, Chapter 41, Section 810 and 81W. and the applicant requests a waiver under 40B, and the planning board says it's not applicable since the zoning board of appeals is approving body under chapter 40B. Would you like me to read another one as well?
So I think like looking ahead, it looks like 4120 is pretty self-explanatory. 4140 is kind of going into a different topic there with the open spaces. So and then we're getting into wetlands. So I personally feel as though 4120, if you want to read that one, and that would
Sure,
be-
I'll give that one a read as well. Section 4120, conforming with the zoning bylaw, all lots shown on the plan shall conform with the requirements for area, dimensions, frontage, buildable area, and all other requirements of the zoning bylaw. Applicant requests a waiver regarding this for under 40B, and the planning board says it's not applicable since the zoning board is approving body under 40B.
Okay. Any discussion amongst the board on these guys? All right, Attorney Mitchell, anything?
So yes, we have different, I have different recommendations for each of these. And Peter Williams, I believe, is in agreement with these recommendations as well. So with regards to 3600, we recommended that this would be handled through that administrative language that we've talked about before. With regards to 3621, I know the zoning board of appeals has very specific provisions about how you address modifications to comprehensive permits that are over and above what is in the 40B regulations and procedures that you have in place for that has worked very well for you when you've had prior modifications, both substantive and not substantive prior modification requests. So in light of that, I would agree this should be waived in its entirety, because I think you have some very detailed provisions that you operate under relating to amendments of or modifications after approval. And then with regards to 4121, we believe this should just be rewritten to add in the following phrase at the end: not otherwise waived or modified by this comprehensive permit. So with that additional language, we think that this bylaw can stay with that additional language.
All right, Attorney Augustino, do you have any comments on those?
No, I think the administrative language is probably satisfactory, subject to final review to make sure we're not creating any problems is our concern. And I believe requirements area buildable and all of the requirements of the zoning body, not otherwise made. I think 4120 is fine as well. With that amendment.
Okay.
I mean, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, excellent, guys. All right, so before we go into any public input, let's look ahead for a next public hearing date. So Marguerite, you can just remind those making the schedules, Wednesdays generally don't work great for you, and that was the first and third Thursday, correct?
That's correct.
All right, how soon do you want to go about doing the next meetings? I'm just going to grab my work schedule if you guys want to start looking ahead.
So the 27th, our regular ZBA meeting, we have anything on that? Obviously, Marguerite can't meet that meeting. Do we have a meeting though?
The 27th, no, we had canceled that. And with a potential date of being this meeting, but then we found out that we could have it a little bit sooner. So the 27th that we had potentially reserved for this meeting, obviously, like I said, was sooner. So no, we're not meeting on the 27th, but if that doesn't work the best for Marguerite, then it's kind of a moot point at this point. So
The 20th, they're having the stormwater, and I'd like to get some input back from Jonathan Gray before we have our next meeting on that matter anyway. So I'm thinking if we are going to try to do anything after the 20th, I don't know how long Jonathan has time to write up I'd like to have something as well as all members should get something.
right, and if since we're going to be avoiding that week, that will not interfere with any of that won't be the first or third for Marguerite. So
What about the 26th Tuesday? Does that work for anyone?
It's fine for me. My work schedule's done, so I work until 4:30, so it doesn't matter to me.
Works for me. I just don't know about anyone else.
26 is fine.
Okay.
Well,
As long as we can start later, I just, the 6 o'clock timeframe is just not frankly feasible for me. I
Mr. Chairman,
also think about the fact that I haven't seen my children all day and I have to follow up on their education. So
Oh, I know.
to be perfectly honest, I haven't eaten tonight and
children are.
and I've got kids who are, I was doing math problems up until 2 minutes before. So if we could push that back, that works great.
Okay, Bishop, go ahead.
Children are highly overrated. Don't.
I sometimes feel that way, but
Remember the orders of operations?
yeah, exactly.
Grandchildren.
Yeah, it's hard to shift gears always.
So I do just want to check.
Something, please.
Sure, yeah.
Can we, for the purposes of the next, until we get through those waiver lists, can we start immediately with the waiver list and forego any of the perennial issues, you know, the stormwater management, the sewer and the water, these are perennial issues that keep coming up. We don't ignore them, but let's dedicate one meeting for them towards the end. By that time, everybody would have had time to respond but let's just immediately open it up and go straight into waivers, just to kind of be more efficient.
I'm not opposed to that. I mean, Marguerite, or is there an issue with that? I don't think so.
You can also go a little bit later.
No, that's fine. I don't mind moving this meeting, you know, stopping the meeting more like 9:30.
Right.
Starting the meeting up, you'll have to do some initial, you know, introduction and moment of silence, but we can start immediately by even just start by where we were, and then everything we need to come back to, we can come back to at the end all at once.
I'm not opposed to that at all, Bishop. How anyone amongst the board? I'm sure you guys would probably prefer that too, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Greg, is that okay with you?
It's okay, but I like I say, we are having a meeting on the 20th in regards to stormwater. Something as long as I can get some paperwork or some email from Jonathan Gray in regards to how that meeting went. So I at least have some, I like to have everything written for me for questions later.
I agree, but I mean, I kind of would, to be honest with you, I would prefer that we jump into the waivers, and then when we get closer to the public input portion, I think maybe then can we address the meeting in case anyone from stormwater happens to be there or have any comments.
Well, actually, yeah, to that point, I mean, we're going to be going through waivers for the Stormwater Committee, which address our position, yeah.
Exactly.
So when we get to those, we can maybe discuss them then. And the answer is we'll comply with the stormwater management regulations. I mean, we're going to get there. We'll get there.
I think that, Greg, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I'm fine with the waivers, but like I said, I asked Peter Williams to get me a couple things on the road construction for phase 1, how many house lots, things like that. I'd like to have all that information as well.
Yeah, we'll still get it, and obviously we'll still address it. But I do, in the sake
You
of
gotta understand that this stuff comes up in these waivers different as we go along. I want to be able to put that and voice my opinion on it. That's why I like to bring it up.
of course, no, absolutely, yeah. But I do know what they mean, though. So that before, so are we good to go with the 26th Tuesday?
Sure. What time?
Well, if Marguerite, you said 6 is pushing it for you a little too early. You guys, excuse me, sorry. You want to go with 7, and then I don't mind for the sake of that meeting going later. That's fine with me. Does anyone have anything especially early on the next day that they have feel as though that might be, they don't want a late night? I mean, I'm off the next day, so I'm fine pushing through.
I
So
leave every day at 5:30. So the late time does bother me. So I'd like to say 7 to 10, no later than 10.
oh yeah, no, I agree with that. How's that sound for you guys?
That works for me.
Yeah, as long as it's
Sounds fine.
All right,
Mr. Chair,
Cable, I know you're there. If you can hear us and get us any kind of feedback, is that okay with you guys? The Tuesday, the 26th at 7?
Who are you talking to, Zach?
Cable.
Oh, okay.
Could you please repeat the question?
Yep. If Tuesday, the 26th would work for you guys for the next meeting
For 6 o'clock,
for 7.
for 7, that works.
Excellent. Okay, so do I have a motion to continue the public?
Mr. Chair, just could we check with Carrie Easterday to see if that works for her as well?
Oh, geez, you're right. Sorry, Carrie, I can't see you, so I can't hear you. Is that all right?
So you said that's the 26th, right?
You said
Yes.
correct.
At 7, yes, I'm free.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so do I have a motion? I would like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to Tuesday, May 26th at 7 p.m. held remotely.
Chairman, I'll make a motion to move the next meeting to Tuesday, the 26th, 7 p.m.
And just state your name, please, for the record.
Alina, sorry.
That's all right. And then do I have a second?
I'll second that motion, Greg Logan.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Favor?
can we have it so that it does end at 10? Because I do have work the next morning.
That's fine with me, absolutely.
Alrighty.
So, Jonathan Gray, if you could just add a note just to remind me, or even if you want to put on the agenda what time the meeting will adjourn, that please.
Yep. And can we just have each member just say aye on the motion so that we get that official roll call?
Okay.
Michelle Leva, aye.
Greg Logan, aye.
Peter Karen, I.
All right. Zach Karen, aye. All right. So, is there any public input today? Jonathan, I'll go with you first. Do you have anything via email?
I don't believe so. Carrie, do you concur in terms of no emails have come in?
Just looked at it, no emails
Okay.
Okay.
and no
Is there,
phone calls.
okay. Is there anybody here on at this point? If there's anybody here on the call that wishes to speak, if you could just unmute your microphone and state the name and just give us a second to make sure we hear you. I hear moving. I just can't tell if there's someone trying to click on or if it's just background noise.
I think it's background noise.
Yep. Okay.
While we're waiting, I didn't mean to insult you by comparing you to other builders. You've done a fine job for us and we appreciate it. It's just that we also have to look out for the town's best interest, in which it's never been an issue with you. But as you're well aware, there are builders out there that becomes an issue, and not to treat everybody the same, but we always have to look after the town's best interest.
Absolutely, absolutely, no problem.
Yeah, and I'll just note that everyone has the ability to unmute themselves in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. So if there's any sort of confusion there, you can always unmute yourself when I'm managing the meeting. So.
Okay, so I don't believe we have anything else. Do we want to, I mean, I did make the say that we would adjourn at 9. Do we want to tackle a couple more of these? There is nothing else on our agenda, correct? Aside from approving minutes, right?
Yeah, nothing else.
All right. Do you guys want to continue another half hour and bang more of these out? Is that anyone opposed to that?
Marguerite, your kids are asleep by now.
That's right. I'm fine with it.
Attorney Augustino, is that work for you? Would you rather?
Yeah, let's do it.
I had a
I don't
feeling
have any
you'd be
place
okay
to
with
be.
that.
This is the most fun I've had all week.
Okay.
It's
All right,
not
so,
good with me. I'm just kidding.
Oh, great.
He's got the lights out. He turned the lights out.
Actually, Chairman Karen, we've got a raised hand from Dennis Murphy. I'm actually, okay, Dennis, you're unmuted right now, so
Okay.
feel free to speak.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, now that you're going to go forward, I was going to comment on the wetlands protection, but I'll save my comments until you address that one if you like. The problem of doing the public comment at the end is I'm not involved in the discussion at the time, but I would like to comment specifically about that one in 4150.
Okay, so that being said, Jonathan Gray, if you can just pull back up the waiver list, just so I did see it ahead. Can we just figure out where that is exactly?
Yeah, let me just find it. Is this looks like it's the incorrect one. Sorry about that.
That's right.
Yeah, so for some reason, I'm not sure why, but my computer keeps pulling up the wrong document here. So let me try to put one more time here. It might take me just a moment to close out some of these tabs. Hold on.
Sure.
All right.
There we go. Okay.
Where did we leave off?
So we finished 4120. So the next we have 4140, 4150. So 4150, that's going to be the wetlands protection. So why don't we, in this case, we just do one at a time. So if you could do 4140, and then we'll have our comments, and then we'll go into 4150.
Sure. So section 4140, open spaces in its entirety, and the applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section. As the Zoning Board of Appeals will review these under Chapter 40B, and the Planning Board recommendation is to deny. Applicant must provide suitable public safety areas for residents to enjoy a passive recreation area. The opinion of Parks and Rec should be sought.
So Greg, here you go. This goes right into comment you made at the start of the meeting in regards to how now we always kept saying, you know, when we get to it, we'll discuss the playground. So now is the time to discuss anything like that. So if you want to mention any comments or questions you had referring to that.
Okay, well, I want to refer this back to Fisher and Chris. Couple things. It was left in the air. You could go either way, whatever one you wanted to. I just wanted to make sure. It looked like one time we were talking about behind the townhouses over by the bus stop, we were going to have an area out there adequate for open space for recreation. Then I had brought to the attention in regards to the 1-1 pitch on the riprap behind the townhouses, how it could be a spot there for someone to fall, and there's also a walk path there. So if we're not going to do something on the property, what I was wondering is what type of funding would you be allocating to the town? So, because I have heard out from the playground committee in regards to some projects that they're doing within the town, and obviously playgrounds are quite expensive from what I found out. So I was just feeling your thoughts and what you thought you might want to consider on that.
Yeah, so to hopefully refresh everyone's memory, I believe we did close the loop on that we were going to provide funding for offsite recreational activities in the town. However, the town decided to use it, and that we were just going to designate some area on the site that the future residents could decide what they want to do with it. And we were going to just note some area. And I believe, you know, we've already done that, but in our proposed conditions, we proposed a condition number 42 that describes we were going to contribute the sum of $10,000 to the town, and the town can use it however they see fit on whatever playground is in need of either upgrading or new equipment or whatever the town sees fit to do. So I believe we've covered all those, Greg.
Yeah, because there was no monies discussed. At one time I was at 100 and Bishop laughed at me. So then we were down to 80 and I still got the smirk.
He's still laughing.
I'm just letting you know that the town is putting in a new playground in the North Dayton area. They're funding the town's trying to come up with. And that playground is $200,000. We're not asking you for $200,000. However, it is an expense. Now, if we were to make you have a playground onto this particular property that we were discussing possibly for $10,000, it's really low.
So, Greg, but before they comment, this is one of those things that I completely understand both sides. I mean, in terms of, the Parks and Rec saying must provide suitable public safety areas for residents to enjoy a passive recreational area, is there an exact definition as to what recreational area is? I mean, if they've designated a literal open space, can that be taken as, I mean, they're not saying it has to be a playground. So going back to that,
Michelle was talking about possible nature walk. I mean, that could be considered part of it too. These are things we were going to discuss down the road on going forward, but they did have a spot directly behind the townhouses over towards the power lines, going into that area that they were talking about possibly, you could fly a kite, whatever you want to do in that particular area. It wasn't going to be anything but a mowed down field as far as I was
right. And as sort of just from my opinion, I am okay with that. I don't think we have to put, in my opinion, I don't think we need to say it has to be a quote unquote playground. That is substantial for me. How do you guys feel amongst the board?
My opinion is that we're taking, I forgot how many children, Bishop, did you say you thought were going to be in this development?
Well,
On
actually,
an idea, I'm not going to hold you to it, but roughly what was it?
like 12.
12 kids in this whole development.
Yes. Because
live-
the cottages will have 0 or maybe 1 or 2 because of the
style.
affordable.
Mhm.
The condos are not gonna have any. It's only the single family houses, and single family houses are running about 0.3 per unit. So 0.3, so that's 15.
And they have yards.
They have yards.
Yeah, they're
So-
really small though, guys. They're not big lots.
No, I know.
You look at the plot, I'm looking at the plans now. There isn't a lot of area to put anything because you got to realize these are going to be small areas and there's going to be wood line behind it.
So, Greg, do you disagree with me? Do you feel like that space is not enough? Do you
I
feel
feel that we're leaving something on the table here for the town's benefit. That's what I'm saying.
so? You would prefer the cash allotment?
Well, we were giving up the sidewalk thing, Zach, if you remember last time. It
Yeah.
was $200,000. We can't ask the developer to put in a sidewalk.
No.
That's a state road. We were following up, finding out how that was going to be.
Yeah.
There is no, so 12 kids. Okay, my biggest concern has been that highway with kids. That next street up in front of the town hall is where the children would be going. We don't have an adequate area in here and for kids to play. I understand over here in that area where the houses are going to be, yeah, they could probably put a swing set, but when you get, he's saying possibly 1 to 2 children in each one of these in phase 1 areas for the most part. I really think looking at what I see here, there's going to be a lot more than 12 children, but that's, he does this every day. He does a study. That's what it comes back as, but I just don't want to see us not adequate some money for either future. Again, some of this is going to be in a, they're going to have their own committee for their own properties, but there's some of it that's not. And the ones that have children, there isn't a lot of area for them to play because it's so developed.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're going to be moving behind the townhouses. And if you're only saying there's going to be 1 or 2 children, that's going to make the people in the townhouses a little upset that there's children hanging in their backyards. So I understand Bishop's concern on that, but I'm just stating is that I really think Bishop's offered to give the town a set sum of money to use towards wherever we shall need for the children to play. If he's only going to mow the grass over there, and that's going to be within the developments of the townhouses, either we do consider possibly thinking about doing the recreation path again. Now that's who's going to maintain that. That's another situation. Or we have him adequate some funding for the town to use as it sees fit, like what we
Yeah.
last talked about.
So, yeah. So personally, I'm leaning more towards the allocating the funds, because if you look at the project, I mean, where and what, and then we're going down the whole road of, they use it, I mean, they put it in, people don't maintain it, it's more of a liability.
Yeah, like you
I'm-
did, yeah.
Yeah, if I could jump in, I mean, I
Yeah.
thought we closed the loop on this and we did decide, or the board took a straw poll vote and decided that they were going to say offsite mitigation. And then it just became a question of the amount.
The amount.
And, I think we have a proposed condition in there. I'm sure we can continue that conversation if there's a strenuous objection, but we did have a hearing where we said, this is the passive recreation area. They can decide in the future. And, we're not going to worry about on-site. We will give you a number for off-site. I think to close the loop on that this evening, we can table it. But I will say the sooner that Bishop can stop paying professionals and engineers and everybody else to go through the hearing process, the more money he'll be able to dedicate to
Yeah, I understand what you're saying,
future
but that's not helping.
Every meeting costs me like $4,000. So if we save 3 meetings, I'll add $12,000 to that.
That's.
And I'm not trying to be flip about it. I really
No,
am.
I know.
I'm being sincere, and that Bishop is going to do his best.
But
These are all-
$10,000
these are all
to me is
concerns,
not
so.
sufficient enough, Bishop, giving us some kind of benefit for the town. Because if you had to put a playground in there, you're gonna spend it over 30. I can get the documentation if you'd like, Bishop.
So Greg, just for the record, are you, your
I'm
advice?
fine with tabling it like Chris stated. I think something we could bring up later, but I'm fine with the understanding that it goes to the town to use at its playgrounds. Not
yeah.
that this is offering, though, I can't.
So I mean, as far as making sure I understand you, we can move on from this. I don't think there's a need to table it. I think it can just be addressed in the conditions.
Exactly, I'm fine with.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fine by me. Anyone else on the board feel differently? Okay, perfect. So Jonathan, if you can move on to that would be 4150, and this is for Attorney Murphy. This is referring to the wetlands protection. So Jonathan Gray, if you can read that, please.
Sure. Section 4150, wetlands protection. The board may condition its approval of a definitive plan upon the issuance of an order of conditions by the Conservation Commission of the town pursuant to the Wetlands Protection Act, General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40. The applicant requests a waiver to the above referenced section, as the ZBA will review these plans under 40B. And the planning board recommendation was that conditions should be established per the Conservation Commission pursuant to the Wetlands Protection Act.
So, and before we go to any public input on this, Marguerite, is there anything you have comments to this?
So our position on this was that this seemed to be more administrative in nature, because we know that the Wetlands Protection Act is not within the purview of the Zoning Board of Appeals, except with regards to the local requirements of the Conservation Commission, that the Conservation Commission still needs to review and approve this development proposal under the Wetlands Protection Act. And that process is going to have to play out even just with regards to how 40B itself works. So the reference to the board does need to be updated to reflect it being the Zoning Board of Appeals. If you as a Zoning Board of Appeals wants to make sure that there's an actual condition in your decision that says that you need to comply with the Wetlands Protection Act, I don't think it's necessary because it's required by law. But if that
Right.
makes you feel more comfortable, we certainly can add that.
I don't think since it is required by law, I don't think there's a need to put it in. How about the board before we turn it over to public input?
Marguerite, I have one question. So if I understand you correctly, so we're gonna put in a condition that they have to meet with conservation. They still have to meet the conservation Massachusetts state laws in regards to those setbacks. Am I correct?
They have to comply with the Massachusetts laws, yes.
Yes.
They have asked for waivers. They have included the local provisions,
I understand that, yeah.
and we'll get to that later, but they do have to comply with the Massachusetts laws.
Okay.
So just a quick note on the my continuing concern about strict reading of the language. This says order conditions by the Concom of the town as a prerequisite. And under the state law, there is an opportunity for, for whatever reason, there's a problem at the local level under review under the Wetlands Protection Act, we could get a superseding order of conditions. So as long as it's clear that, as long as we get approval under the Wetlands Protection Act, whether it's an order of conditions or a superseding order of conditions, that we're okay. So, I think this is one where I just have to see the final language. And I'll
Okay,
wait.
so I will let, oh, go ahead.
Nope, that's it. I was gonna say, we'll hear what Attorney Murphy has to say.
Okay, Attorney Murphy, if you're still there, whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for letting me chime in on this one.
Yep.
If the board remembers, I submitted a letter back when the project was first proposed about the wetlands resources on the site and how that played out in the prior permitting. I'm not going to get into that tonight. And if the other attorneys, town council and Attorney Agostino, are interpreting this provision to only apply to the State Wetlands Protection Act, I'm fine with that. That's state law and the board doesn't have the authority to waive it. My concern is that the board not give a blanket waiver from wetland protections and instead defer to the town's Conservation Commission. I know that they sent you a letter several months ago. They didn't do recommendations the way the planning board did, item by item. My hope would be that you could get the chairman of that commission or the the agent, Mr. Mello, to advise you on each one of them, what the recommendation is. In short, the fear is that if you give a blanket waiver, then what you've done is handicap what protections the Concom can impose as part of its proceeding. Unlike this board, you have the power to waive, they don't, and you would have the power to waive their protections. And I think before you grant those or not, you ought to do it one by one with an understanding of how each one affects the various wetland resources. Because I think, my guess is nobody wants to see them all waived. Nobody wants to see them all not waived. And so if we're going to have some give and take, that there be an understanding that if you waive this provision, it saves the certified vernal pools, but not the potential ones, for example. Again, that's beyond what we're doing tonight. And I would just defer to the conservation agent and the commission on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Mitchell, do you have any comments to that before we go to the abutter? I'm sorry, but the applicant.
So, I guess I'm just simply going to say that I feel that the Conservation Commission is still going to have a very involved proceeding before it. And they will be looking at anything that is covered by the Wetlands Protection Act, the regulations of DEP. The area that this zoning board has control over is any local provision that is beyond those requirements. And I feel that the language that I'm proposing for this particular provision, 4150, which is an administrative type of language, would indicate that, under 40B and the comprehensive permit and the plans, the Zoning Board of Appeals is the one that is addressing the local provisions. To the extent that this addresses the State Wetlands Protection Act, that somehow this bylaw could be interpreted as addressing that, 40B itself says that's not within the purview of this Zoning Board of Appeals. So I think the language that we're going to work out will not supersede that. It will not somehow make you be waiving the Wetlands Protection Act, nor would I want you to do that or recommend that you do that.
Okay, and Attorney Augustino, do you have any comments?
Not on this one specifically. I think Attorney Murphy's commentary is more applicable to the waivers requested further down. And I'm
Okay.
sure he'll have comments on those, but we can talk about those when we get there. And, you know, we did go line by line on those as
Mhm.
far as the local wetlands bylaw, and where they are more stringent than the State Wetlands Protection Act, we requested waivers in order to allow construction of the plan that we've already put a lot of time into and reviewed. So to the, that's what we're requesting. And generally, unless there's some specific critical local concern that the Concom has identified, it's appropriate to proceed under the Wetlands Protection Act. So I think, you know, the answer is, at this point, table Attorney Murphy's comment until we get to the other waivers.
Until we get some more specific ones. Okay. Attorney Murphy, does that make sense to you?
Sure. I think those other ones are numbers 63 to 69 in my version. And again, I would ask that when the board considers those, it considers the comments of the Concom about how each such waiver affects particular resources. So, for instance, there are setbacks that are set by state law. That's the Wetlands Protection Act. Some of those are, say, 25 feet from a certain resource area. The town of Dayton has implemented setbacks in certain areas that are more stringent. And I think everyone ought to hear from Charlie Mello or whoever about how each one of those setbacks affects whatever they were trying to protect or may want to protect in their permitting. If you waive them, they can't protect them. And I just would hate to see a repeat of what happened 5 years ago, which is a zoning board that granted a blanket waiver and then a wetland proceeding where they were powerless to protect the wetlands beyond the state statute.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you. All right. So the time is 8:51. We probably have time to do a couple more of these. So John, if you want to bang out, I guess I can see 30. I can see 31. How lengthy are the next two? I just don't want us to.
Let's see. 31 is relatively short. 32 looks relatively short. But
And then 30. So if you want to do 31 and 32, and then we'll probably call it at that point, depending on the discussion. So go ahead.
Sure. So waiver number 30, which is section 4163, all construction details, materials, methods, and specifications shall conform to the current requirements of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts standard specifications for highways and bridges, Boston, Massachusetts, as supplemented. Applicant requests a waiver under 40B. The planning board recommendation was deny. The town cannot waive a state requirement. And waiver number 31, which was section 4167, all required local, state, and federal permits, licenses, and approvals shall be obtained prior to the start of construction, including but not limited to DEP water quality certificate and EPA NPDES construction permits. Applicant requests a waiver under 40B, and planning board recommendation was that it's not applicable since zoning board is the approving body under 40B.
All right. Any feedback on these guys?
Are you looking for the zoning board members?
Yes.
Not at this time.
All right. Attorney Mitchell.
So we have, we're looking at 4163 and 4167, correct?
Yep.
Can I speak on this one?
Yes.
Sure.
Go ahead.
4163, I guess, in most towns, that is a standard requirement. And I'm wondering why you're requesting that to be waived, that it doesn't conform to state standards.
So, Peter, there are several different road types, that are referenced in those standards,
Mhm.
tertiary, secondary, side street, if, I suppose you want to ensure, well, number one, the way we looked at it, we've proposed a road profile that shows the construction we're proposing. So the idea generally is, look at the road profile we've proposed.
Mhm.
Is it okay? Give us a thumbs up. If not, thumbs down. And this is a local bylaw that references a state requirement. So to the extent the state requirement is applicable, yeah, we will comply with that. I think it'd just be clearer if we just said, do what you're showing on the plan, but understanding we're going through the exercises of preserving local bylaws. I think our only request would be just which section of the standard specs for highways and bridges, are you particularly, is applicable to each, particular road? Is there anything specific? I mean,
I'm more concerned with like placement construction methods included and material, standards.
yeah, and I think, generally, we have to comply with those anyways, and we do as a matter of course.
What do you
Um,
mean by have to? Unless this is in there, then you could, you know what I mean?
No, I mean, we've shown, we have to, in the sense that we've shown a road profile.
Mhm.
So is there a concern you have about what we show as the detail on our plan?
I think I'd have to go through the plans again to be sure to confirm that. I think I'd like to table this for now and just make sure that I can talk to Greg and go over the plans and see, what we may need for material, specific material.
Right.
and placement methods.
Yeah, and I think we're perfectly fine with that. It sounds fine. I don't want somebody, and this has been my common theme. I don't want somebody telling us that we have to build it to the specs of a 6-lane highway because, they pointed to this provision.
Then I guess we could waive it and add conditions, regarding appropriate sections of the materials and placement and construction.
Best suggestion I've heard all night. I love it. If we want to do that, that'd be great. I mean, you could cut and paste right out of it, and that would be wonderful. So,
And further on that, our detail
Marguerite has,
section does show
Yeah,
that we're referencing Mass DOT materials.
Okay.
And if Peter and I can take a look at that, make sure we got everything on there that he'd like to see.
Sounds good.
all right, Attorney Mitchell, do you have any comments as to what they were discussing there for the language?
So the recommendation was going to be to modify this language in some fashion, but I think that if the two engineers are able to speak and agree to that, we can come back with the actual language for later to the board.
Okay. All right, so, perfect. All right, so I will do one more last call for any public input. Jonathan, Gray, I assume we have nothing that came in?
just quickly, did we cover 32?
No,
Sorry,
No.
it's okay.
That's all right.
Never mind.
I haven't provided the comment on 31 either.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you doing them one at a time?
We just read two of them.
Okay,
So-
so if you want the comment on 31,
Okay,
The-
yep, sure.
our comment is that we don't agree a waiver should be provided for this.
Okay,
State and federal permit requirements cannot be waived. And that's what this provision references.
The wording, I think, is where the concern is, right? All required local. Is that what we're trying to remove from that, Chris?
Yeah, again, it's just one of those where usually there is a statement in the permit that says you shall obtain all state, federal licenses. And you're right, Greg, thank you. And you hit the nail on the head, is that where you preserve these things, you get a word like local, and then, what local permit, and then somebody says, hey, you didn't get your earth removal permit.
So
Well,
you're not
your earth
converting
removal
the-
permit is your comp permit if you have one. But
Yeah.
I'd prefer to essentially cut and paste this and put it in the permit as a condition without the word local.
Because you're not trying to cut any, you can't cut any corners of DEP and EPA anyways.
You got it.
Yeah, so for the most part, it's just the wording that needs to be changed on this that I see. Is there anything else, Marguerite, that you might be concerned with on that?
Yeah, and
Matt?
I mean, we do need we need a building permit, you know, obviously, we're not trying to, but usually that's articulated in, and again, my only hope is to avoid where you have multiple layers of multiple local bylaws plus the conditions. I've seen it cause real bad problems, and I'm trying to avoid those. So, you know, bottom line is I think we can work it out. You know, I was gonna talk to Marguerite about how to fix this one.
Marguerite, do you have any comment?
So I don't mind having a further discussion with Attorney Augustino. I think the earth removal permit conversation will happen later because they've asked for a waiver around that. And we have our position on that as well. So I don't mind having a conversation further on that. And we could probably, it may make sense since we're right at the end of this to start back with that
Okay,
at the next meeting and then move forward from there. And it sounds like if Peter Williams and Greg Driscoll have worked out language for the one prior to that, we can have that provided too. Otherwise, we can just have that provided with everything at the end.
all right, so that being said, so Jonathan and Carrie, is there anything that has come up in the past 2 minutes? I'm assuming.
Nope, I've got nothing.
Okay, Carrie, is that a no from Carrie?
I've received nothing by email or phone.
Excellent. Okay, so obviously we don't need to make another vote because we already made it, but just as a reminder, the next meeting is going to be May 26th, held remotely, 7 p.m. with the understanding going into the meeting that it will adjourn at 10 o'clock. And we will go right into the waivers, pick up where we left off. That being said, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn for this evening.
Actually, we've got to do the minutes.
Thank you for good catch. All right, so that being said, there's no more business for anybody regarding Strawberry Fields on the call. So you guys are all set for this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
guys.
for
Be safe.
everything.
Have a good Memorial Day weekend in the meantime. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
All right. Stay safe.
Thank you, guys. All right, so Chris left. All right, perfect. So we have left on the call myself, we have Jonathan, we have Peter, we have Greg, we have Michelle, we have, who else? We have Ryan. Ryan is Ryan still there?
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna switch to the gallery views. I can see. Hey, there we go. Perfect. Okay.
You still
So-
need me, Mr. Chairman?
No, I believe we are all set.
Okay.
See you later,
Good night,
Marguerite.
gentlemen. Yep. And I'll follow up with you, Jonathan, after the Stormwater Committee meeting.
Yep.
Thank you. Take care all.
Ryan and Jonathan, you may certainly unmute if you just for the sake of this conversation. If there's anything else you guys want to add, any comments, questions, all we really do have left is to approve the minutes. Obviously, Ryan, you can't really approve the minutes yet, but do you have any questions or comments for anything that was made tonight?
No, I'm all set.
Excellent. Okay. Jonathan Gale, how are you? Is everything going good on your end? Think Jonathan fell asleep maybe?
It's muted.
No, I know. I figured he would have chimed in. Oh, there he is.
Okay, there I am.
There you go.
Jonathan, how you doing? Good?
I'm good. I appreciate the fact that everything is being read line by line.
Yes, that was one thing that Marguerite and I discussed in great in depth at last meeting and tonight as well to make sure that if there was any questions or comments from anybody regarding that we were going to adhere to that, and that was going to be the.
Well, at least in my case, I appreciate it because even though I can listen to it on the other computer, when it's put on the screen and Jonathan posts it up, it doesn't translate at the same time while I'm listening. So I'm just letting you guys know I do appreciate you sticking to that.
Absolutely.
I know it's a pain. I know it makes the meetings longer, but it allows me to be a participant regardless of which side of the table I'm on. So thank you all very much.
it does make it longer, but to be honest with you, I really don't consider it a pain. As someone who's going through this for the first time, I'm sure Greg and Peter, Karen, you can probably agree that yes, it may be tedious, but it's already helped me greatly to hear everything out loud and then hear them talk about it. It does, yes, it does add to the time, but it's more helpful than it is a pain, to be honest with you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all.
Sure, of course.
Plus, he must love listening to my wonderful voice, reading off each individual waiver, of course.
Yeah, you've kind of got that Radiohead voice. It's getting there slowly.
Yeah.
I am all for Jonathan Gray. I am all for switching it up. I mean, I wouldn't want to be the only one doing it. I did ask Marguerite how we should go about doing that. She said,
I have no problem reading them.
You never have a problem with anything, so I didn't think that you would. All right. So that being said, has everyone had a chance to read the minutes yet?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Is there any objections? Anything that needs to be added or changed or removed?
No.
No objection from Jonathan Gale.
Sounds good. All right. So that being said, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes before I get the dates wrong, Jonathan.
January 14th and March 10th, I believe.
I believe it was. Yep. I just exited on the app, so I didn't have the date in front of me. So, yep. So do I entertain a motion to approve those?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes for March 10 and March 14 as submitted.
It's May 14th, right?
I'm sorry, May 14th. Wow.
Nope, it would be March.
It is March. Yes,
Oh,
I'm listening
yeah,
to it in my
you're
other ear. It is March. May
That's
14th
all right.
is now.
Is there any, and do I hear a second?
I second that motion. Michelle Lima.
Any discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect.
And just so there's no one opposed to this?
No.
Okay,
No.
great. Now I can write everyone's name down.
Excellent. All right. That being said, yes, I do entertain a motion to adjourn.
Zach, before we
Oh.
have a motion to adjourn, I just want to clarify, we have the next meeting for Strawberry Fields on the 26th, but other than that, there are no other upcoming meetings for the ZBA on the schedule as of now.
That is correct. Not until June.
Okay, and do we have to do anything with regard to submitting a budget or any kind of a supplemental budget to the town, what am I thinking of? I'm losing my brain
meeting.
system tonight. Yes, for the town meeting, do we have to submit anything
So
at all or approve
I guess-
any budgets or anything?
we haven't really all met since the budget meeting, Jonathan. So, I mean, we haven't heard anything back. They're looking for anything else, correct?
Nope. Yeah, I don't think there's anything that we need to do is regarding the annual town meeting. I will note that the planning board is requesting funding for a plan copier, which would be great to have. So if someone has like a giant set of plans, they can bring them in and it not only can make copies, but also scan the document and create a PDF from that. So it would be really helpful to have that. So I just figured I'd mention that. It's not something that the ZBA is asking for, but it's something that the planning board is asking for.
Jonathan, is that something that we would be potentially sharing with them and they would ultimately be asking us to share the cost of it?
Yes, so it would be on a, they would allow any town department that needs to use it could use it. For whatever the cost of each scan would be, it would probably, I don't know exactly. We could ask Carrie exactly.
But I mean, not for the purchase or lease of the unit.
No, we don't have to contribute to that.
So that being said, we'll just take it out of Jonathan Gale's stipend if we need anything. Okay, guys.
There you go. I can do it.
All right, sounds good.
I got this.
Obviously, for the record, I'm kidding. Okay, so that being said, do I enter a motion to adjourn?
I second it, Jonathan Gale.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That was all of us.
See you
Good night,
later.
everybody.
God
Thanks
bless.
very much. Thank you.
Good night. Good night,
Good night,
everyone.
guys.